Okay, good morning, everyone, or afternoon or evening, wherever you're from. Welcome to the July 8th FMDiSC meeting of 2022. We've got a pretty full meeting today. We've got Tony White, Jonn Howell, and Marc Larochelle, who's going to give us some great presentations. I'm going to mute everybody, and then Tony, you'll have to unmute yourself just to make sure that everybody is muted here, because it always seems to be a little bit of an issue. I'm going to have Tony and probably Jonn present, and then we'll get into breakout rooms and so on after that. So right now I'm going to mute everybody. Tony, unmute yourself.
Okay, I am unmuted.
Okay, so our first presenter is Tony White, and Tony's going to show us some cool developer tools he's put together. So the floor is yours, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Barry. And thanks everyone for having me. So the topic I have for you all today, let me share my screen, is code generation. And I got a bunch of things to show you. A little bit of house cleaning up front. I am going to reference content that from previous presentations. So I'm just going to point you to this website. At some point during the presentation, maybe in a little bit, I'll drop a link. It's twdesigns.com with an S. There's another website out there. And I'm going to point to this a couple times during the presentation. Very simple, basic website. Infographics on the left. 4 presentations I did for your friends up in San Francisco area. That I'll mention, and a podcast with Scott Rose and Aaron. First episode's worth watching. I do hold the record for the FileMaker podcast with the fewest number of episodes. Tough to beat. These things are worth a look. Right now as a concept, they're way out of date, 15, we're on 19. But we're using data tables, shout out to Jeremy there. And I think it's a good way to organize things. I'm not updating them anymore. Anyone wants to pick that up, have at it. At some point, I'm going to do an AppleScript thing. I have an AppleScript here under products and freebies, free. This goes way back, but the code still works, provided you change FileMaker Developer. It's what they used to call it, to FileMaker Pro Advanced or FileMaker Pro. And then change the name of your table. You'll see that later in the presentation. So that's the nickel tour on the website. So I'm going to cover a bunch of things on the overall topic of code generation. I'm going to try and go from simple to complex. And I'm going to start off with a sample file. Oh, and fair warning, I am demonstrating on one of my older, more legacy computers. And I'm doing that because I have a bunch of computers because I have a client base that spans a number of versions. And so I'm demonstrating on this because this machine is a machine that I have Omnigraphal, Mouse Posay, Script Editor, and a few other things. So that's why I'm demoing on this. This might look a little bit legacy to some people. We got other computers for other versions. So let's see, simple to complex. What I would define as simple, actually, let me go backwards a second. Code generation, 2 kinds, conceptual thought here. When we're building a FileMaker solution, we're going to be either working with text, for instance, in a calculation, and you might want to build a calculation or a custom function, and you might want to code generate it out using grep or something like that. Maybe a Mac OS X service is coming up later in the presentation. The other thing that we're going to do is FileMaker. We're going to work with FileMaker code objects. FileMaker code objects, it's a bit of a made-up term that I use to refer to the objects in FileMaker that we use to build a solution. For example, in my conceptual model, a script is an object, script step is an object, fields, tables, on and on custom function. I call them FM code objects. And that's actually one of the infographics worth a look later on if you want to have a look. Gets good reviews. My personal favorite infographic, the one for the FMP URL is the crowd pleaser, but I like the other one, FM code objects as ZRD. All right, but what are we doing here today? Another background. What are we going to do? Use case. Why would I care? This tool, like I say, simple to complex, is a very simple tool built in FileMaker so people can extend it. It's got a lot of good features that hopefully people will say like, hey, I've never seen that before, and will, you know, adapt it to their own use. It is in FileMaker. I will send this to anyone who sends me a nice email, or an email. Doesn't even have to be nice, but do put code Gen 2 words in the subject line, because I'm going to keep track of these. And subject line code Gen, and just, you know, send me and I'll send it to you. I already have it code. I'll have it in my FileMaker correspondence generation. So it's a little bit of a low tech way to send it, but it gives me an idea of, you know, if who cares about this kind of stuff. And I won't sell your name, obviously. Okay, so what do we have here? We have a FileMaker database. The purpose of this FileMaker database is to do two things. One, to take a FileMaker code object and store it in a database as what I'll call FMXML, which is another word for XML. And it's the FileMaker flavor of XML. And you know, round trip to, at a subsequent time, retrieve that object. A little bit of a demo here is you can. I set this up ahead of time, so you know, people don't have to watch me copy and paste things. This is a feature that I'm actually going to include in the file I'm going to send out. Fair warning, scruffy code, but working code. It's actually code work in progress, because I think I can make it better, but it's pretty darn good, pretty darn useful. As is, it's the ability to use the FMP URL from a file like a help. Oh no, hold on, let me just get rid of that. Hey, I got to call you back. I got to call you back. Sorry, that was someone who was going to call me today. I tried to reach him early. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, the ability from a central file like a help ticket system to click a button that takes you to the file, to the layout, and to the records. Anyway, so that's included. So let's do a demo and kind of both the user interface and explain the technology. And I did load 10 things in there, but now I'm going to do this just once for the purposes of a demo. I am here in, right now, let's see, I'm in the script space, obviously. So if I hit copy, I have copied a script. I think that's FileMaker 11 and up, so, you know, it goes way back. I'm going to make a new record. As a demo, I'm going to click in the field, you know, and I'm in a field. It's open for editing. I'm going to go to the edit menu, and you notice that paste is grayed out. What that means is, even though I have something in the clipboard, it's not text. So you have to kind of crack the clipboard. And for that, I'm using Base Elements, which is free and open source, very generous. And I'm clicking a button. And in the interest of time, I'll click the button that says Set FMXML from FM Clipboard. So that's the language that I'm using. And I'm running obviously the script debugger. And you know, fair warning, this code works for me, and it should work as far as I know. I haven't seen it break, but if it breaks, that should just work. So I could just a quick walkthrough. If it's locked, because I could lock this, maybe I have some code that's in there. It's awesome. I don't want it to be edited, so I could say, hey, you can't change that. It's locked. This is what Base Elements uses as the string identifiers, or whatever the heck you want to call them, identifying different types of clipboard types. Scripts are not the same as script steps. I could have put a comment there. And then this is another function. I put a link on the main screen, the splash screen, that takes you straight to the function page. So I'm kind of outsourcing the documentation. It's not in the script, keeping my script lightweight. And then it just works. Like I say, I'm going to give you, you know, just send me, you can have this, you can look at it and figure out. But so let's just see what it does. As you can see, it puts the XML. Now I actually shrunk this screen. If I was using it here, and a lot of people, a lot of developers often develop on big screens. The XML gets a little bit mangled. That's a custom function. Should look a little bit more like that. Oh, now it looks okay, but it looks weird here. Okay, definitely works. Okay, I'm gonna actually just round trip it. Worked when I demoed to myself and a few other people. It's looking a little funny here. Paste. Okay, seems to round trip okay. So what do I mean round trip? This is a text, obviously, text in a FileMaker situation. The okay, so let's just, I don't know why it looks funny. So I am going to actually, let me just go back and show you that all the custom functions are already documented. I got to move things around a little bit here. This is my little splash screen. So the functions that we're using, base elements and monkey bread. The monkey bread are kind of a little bit optional. They colorize XML or they colorize JSON. And this is my website right there. We're using the clipboard formats, and blue means it's a hyperlink. I don't like to underline it. It makes it hard to read. So you can just go, that comes in the file, send the email, admin's the password, that'll be in the email. And like I said, you can play around. Okay, so that's documentation on the functions that are used. Oh, what do we do? We're using base elements. We're using monkey bread to format the XML, pretty print format, whatever the correct term is. Otherwise, it's all, scrunched. The colorize. I have monkey bread, the paid version. I'd imagine that's a paid feature. Maybe there's 30-day demo. It's not necessary, it'll still work, but I like the color. That's awesome. I am using monkey bread to format it. You could use base elements for that, the free 4.2 and above. But I built it with the monkey bread, but you could swap it out if you want. Okay, so let's go to something that looks a little prettier. This is, by the way, I'm probably going to delete this custom menus. I'm working on a custom menu presentation, not done. More complicated than it looks. I am going to take this string and I'm going to drag it here. Oops, I'm going to drag it where I'm supposed to drag it, where it says drag here. Okay, and that bolded things. The point of that is that, and I've already done it here, we'll see when I do the more complicated thing, the ability to kind of get a visual pop on the XML. Like if I'm looking for something to merge out, just to drag and drop and make it bold is a nice feature. So once again, the code's there, you can have a look. Okay, XML, round trip. Okay, let me go back a moment. All right, so we did successfully demonstrate the ability to copy a script, convert it to text, and take the text and convert it back to FMXML. And that's the basic principle that applies to the objects for which you can copy and paste. And once again, we're using the base elements plugin to, I like to say, crack the clipboard, or to encode, decode the clipboard to get at what's inside. And what objects can you do this for? And by the way, this is clipboard XML, which is not to be confused with DDR XML, not the same thing. So FileMaker shipped, you can do this for scripts or script steps, fields or tables, otherwise known as base tables, not to be confused with table occurrences, layout objects. That showed up, I think that was 11. FileMaker 14 gave us the ability to copy and paste custom functions. Value list was 16, custom menus was 17. Custom menus, you don't even have to crack the clipboard. They come back as real text. Take my word for it, please, because I didn't crack any clipboard there. As a matter of fact, that's why you won't see any clipboard string for custom menus, because it's just plain text. It's easier to work with. Awesome feature, by the way, used it last week to roll out some custom menu changes to a customer. Okay, just look in chat. Okay, so that was the simple. Let me go ahead. I've got JSON, but let me stick on the XML theme. I'm going to show you something a little bit more complex. Now, let's actually, this is pretty technical, so I like to throw in the question, like, why do I care? You know, when you're dealing like, wow, man, this is giving me a headache. You know, why do I have to like master this technology, or why would this technology be worth spending some effort to learn? And the answer, in my opinion, would be use cases. So one use case for this would be, simple use case would be like, I want to store things. Like I might have a feature. Like here's a feature that involves 5 different code objects pasted into a solution in sequence. And actually, I'll do that as a demo. It's like, this is, you didn't see it. I loaded this up ahead of time. That's custom functions on the clipboard. Oh, got to click OK. And then keyboard shortcut. And then I'm going to hit paste. And I've already done this. But as you can see, that's custom function showed up in the clipboard, right? And then I would go here next, and there's a sequence to this, and there's a bunch of blog posts that cover the sequence that, you know, you don't have to, but you certainly should paste things in a particular sequence. You know, the script goes before the button, that kind of stuff. And there's a bunch of websites that have that. What did I just do? I just did field definitions. So I could do that. And you get the idea. So if I paste all these in sequence, and we already saw the script, so I'll skip over that. And then finally, layout objects, where I could set the clipboard, click OK. And actually for this demo, I did this ahead of time just to kind of show you. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, I've already saved a lot of time. Like I didn't swap for context here. So to get this feature. So I kind of left something for people to do, but it's a good feature. Oh, and why did I include this? I did a presentation for the user group that meets in England, Brighton, England. Maybe there's more than one, but the one that I attend, really good user group, check it out. FMBug, that's the name, FMBug, that's the name. And they put on a good show, and I did a presentation for them. Not my best presentation, but good content. And so there it is, the same content. So I just wanted to kind of clean that up. Now, let me just pause for a question on any of this stuff. And then next up, just so you know, is something a little bit more complex. We're going to build on this. Any questions at the moment, or should I proceed to the next segment? I'll take that as proceed to the next segment. Okay, so now I have a file. This is an internal file. It's not a finished product. It's not something I would, it's not a finished product. This is an internal tool that we use. It's called system structure. I will show how this is built. Anyone wants to build one of these, I might make a product one day, but it uses the design functions and some of the execute SQL to extract a lot of information, pretty much everything that's available through the design functions into a FileMaker file from which you can do things. I'm also using it to consume DDR stuff from the DDR. I use a lot of different tools, third-party tools. We have some internal tools as well. And the one that I'm using here, shout out to the base elements, because that's the one that I'm using to get the bounds. Actually, let me back it up. What am I doing here? So a little bit of a story, true story. So I have a system that goes way back. You know, I'm around for like more than 20 years in the FileMaker, working. FileMaker 2 and 3, I think, is when I jumped in. And so I have, there's a use case. The FileMaker prior to version 12, if you had, you know, a button, you say, oh, I have a button. Wasn't really a button, it was a grouped object. FileMaker 12 introduced something called a button, which is different than a grouped object, and I'd say better. And it's better in a couple ways. It's easier to get to the conditional formatting. They added glyphs in 14 that work with buttons but not grouped objects. And it's also easier to style. So one of the things that every now and then I feel like doing some work that's not super complicated. And also I like to modernize the code that we have here. And I wanted to swap out a bunch of group buttons, okay, and make them better. So, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time doing it. I wanted it to be accurate, efficient, fast, and all of those things, right? So Here we're going to use XML and we're going to use some technology. So I have basically in the system that I have for myself, I have 131,492 layout objects, and otherwise known as objects, according to the DDR. And some of them are grouped objects, and some of them are grouped objects that run a script called GTRR, otherwise known as go to related record, called by a button, called with a parameter. And so what I have here is I want to make another button. Actually, let's go over there and let's see. All right, let's do that first. I'm going to use this button that says FL. This uses the FMP URL to go to the file, go to the layout. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to run this with the debugger. This is something that I've found very, very useful. I mentioned, like I said, it's good from a system structure file. It's good from a help ticket file. It's also good from a password management utility. And probably it's good from a website. It's really good. Lots of use cases for that. You probably discover some that I didn't mention. So this runs a script called FMP URL to file. Actually, this is wrong. It says it takes a parameter. It does not. It uses the layout context in lieu of a parameter instead of a parameter. And I happen to be on the object DDR. And it basically, it builds a URL. It builds a URL of scheme FMP. And then I open. Now I'm going to go through the main menu. I'm going to run to the debugger. You're going to see kind of a crazy, brace yourself, you're going to see a crazy screen pop up in a second. Oh, maybe not. All right, anyway, it goes through the main menu and it opens the file. So it went to address list and address detail. And why did it do that? It went there because I told it what layout to go to. And I'm actually using the layout ID because that does not change. And I'm swapping it around with a custom function somewhere from layout ID to layout number, which is going to work at real time, at runtime, guaranteed. I don't use name, could be a duplicate name. Runtime guaranteed to work, in my opinion. All right, so that's all swell and dandy to go over there. I'm like, big deal. All right, let's do something more useful. We have here a code template. Matter of fact, we have a lot of code templates. And one of the code templates that we have is GTR all. And I thought this would be sort of an interesting demo just to pick this one. I could have picked others. GTR, just the arrow. But for this one, it doesn't matter which one I pick. So this is XML. As you can see, there is some CSS embedded. Hold on, I'm moving windows around here. Let me just move that window over there. A little bunch of zoom windows here that you guys don't see. Okay, I think I can now maneuver. So this is XML, as you can see. Somewhere in here, let's hope I find it down to the bottom. It's bold. Yeah, there's my merge. So I'm merging in the parameter. And more on that later. But the fact I can merge. Oh, and this is internal, so I didn't polish it up because I'm using this. The demo file, I actually polished it up because other people are going to be looking at it like, what the heck is this? This works, and that's all I cared about. I think I swapped out 1,000, 2,000 objects. I've watched a movie at the same time because it doesn't take that much thinking. All right, as long as this is frontmost, then everything's good. Okay, here we go, big demo coming up. So I am going to click this button. This is build code from template, which, as you might imagine, builds code from a template, which we just saw a moment ago. And I click that button. And matter of fact, a short script, let's have a peek. Why did the AppleScript thing show up? You might be wondering. The reason is this is just basic parsing, nothing fancy. Everybody parses text, right? I'm looking at the base elements data that they gave me, and it comes in a particular pattern. I'm substitute list view, pick it apart, and build an AppleScript. Oh, here's the at this point, line 28, I have created a FileMaker code object. It's no longer text; it's a FileMaker code object, as we saw previously, and then AppleScript. And that's quite sufficient for my purposes. So here's an AppleScript. This is available on the website. As I mentioned, as I showed earlier in the presentation. It's the same, it's not identical, but it's the same concept. See, I changed the name. I'm going to a layout in case I was on the wrong layout. I'm going to the database. I'm talking to the current record. I'm extracting the file name, the layout ID, the bounds, and it's only one page. And then I'm going to go to the database. I'm going to go to the layout by ID because you can do that with AppleScript. I'm going to do menu to go to layout mode, and I'm going to set the bounds of the window to, oh, I'm making the window big. And then this is kind of interesting. It might be relevant, good to know. I'm working off 30-inch monitor, a Dell with no camera. And I have changed the screen resolution for this presentation for all the people watching on non-30-inch monitor, iPad, hopefully. So that's why, so that's like a config. And have run this on a 30-inch monitor. I've run it on a, whatever the heck that is, a 24. Undo works. And then here's the mouse Bose. And actually, I was having a little bit of an issue the other day. It's like, oh, you know, like 2-3 days ago, this wasn't working. I was like, great timing, super. It works super solid. I threw out the cache, C-A-C-H-E, and then it worked. So if it doesn't work on you, throw out the cache, C-A-C-H-E. I think it's in the user space. Anyway, and then I left the delay in just to remind me of the, you know, the warning. It's like if it stops working. But I tested this worked yesterday. I expect it's going to work today. And here we go. Okay, now we're on a Zoom. Did you all see a spotlight appear on the screen by any chance? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay, good. You never know what's going to happen when you're screen sharing off Zoom and people are like 3,000 miles away or in Europe or something. But anyway, so what did it do? Let's do it again because that was pretty cool. So I'm using a program called Mouse Bose, and I remember the day. It was a grand and glorious day when I said to myself, "Hey, I wonder if Mouse Bose is Apple scriptable." And I was like, because I could put a spotlight, and turns out it is. I'll do it again just for fun. So it's telling me that this object is what I want to replace because it's a grouped object. Oh, I just pasted from the clipboard. I should have given you fair warning. Watch this, paste. Okay, so I have these objects. Let's compare. And let's just, for lack of, you know, let's all for once agree that this is the most awesome visual ever. That's a bit of a joke about people agreeing on user interface in a user group. I don't think it's ever happened. Let me use a keyboard shortcut to get a view on the buttons. Let me hover over these, what are those things called? Badges. Okay, button object, GTR, parameter, address, underscore contact address, what you see. And this is the same. So this is double click. That's a grouped object. Whereas this is a button. So if I did this and I like get rid of that and move that where it looks nice, and actually, you know, oh, I could have that. Like I swapped two at once probably. So that is useful. I found it useful. And let's prove that it's useful. Now it is true that you can get to the, you can click twice as of 17 and up and get to the conditional formatting. But here I can just do Control C and I can get straight to the conditional formatting. And the other thing that's cool about this is if I go here, we didn't even bother setting up any styles for grouped objects, as far as I know, in our theme, custom theme. Did a pretty decent presentation on custom themes, migrating from classic to custom. Something that was discussed at the last Brighton user group meeting. But if I go here, you will notice that this particular object that's been code generated has been code generated with a style and does not have any local CSS. Another way to put that is there's no little red dot here because this is clean. There's no local CSS. In other words, it's the stylistic attributes. We didn't put any local CSS in, and we in the code template, we have it set up to with the UUID that represents the BN nav list. So it lands perfectly. So not only have I swapped from a grouped object to a a real button, a FileMaker 12 and up button with glyph possibilities as of 14. Not only did I do all that, but I landed on a style. So I've created a lightweight layout. And so that's code gen with a little Apple script and a decent theme and style construct. So that was my second thing I wanted to show you all. Any questions on that? No question is too silly. That seem useful, potentially?
No questions yet, Tony.
Okay, good. I'll take that as a yes. All right, a yes on the useful. The okay, so let's see. Let's go to JSON. All right. So let's go to JSON. So this file that we saw a moment ago, and by the way, if I pick data element as the thing to kind of visually highlight, it's only because there's a bunch of them and it shows that. Oh, here's a feature, which I'll just, like there's 82 of those. This will highlight, it'll kind of walk through it. So that's kind of cool. So some people, I know that there's a bunch of people out who have similar utilities that they've built for themselves. This isn't the be all and end all. It's actually, I know for a fact, it's not feature complete. There's things that I'm not doing here. I could be using design functions to bring in the strings representing things that I might search and replace on. The features, that said, for someone who doesn't have a utility like this, it's a pretty decent starting point. Hold on, let me see if I can move that window. It's giving me a fight. This self-join is pretty good. I actually left in a bunch of code. I had ripped this down from something bigger, and I went through it and I left in some scripts that I think are not horrible, just because I think they might be fun for people to look at. Use at your own risk. That all said, oh, I wanted to show you this. Okay, so I showed you that. And this utility does code gen. It does FMXML, and it also does JSON. Excuse me, and I did it as one file, mostly because some of the features duplicate. It could have been two files. One is JSON. So I have, what I'm going to show you in the JSON is pretty good and could be better as well. So this is JSON, obviously, and this is JSON colorful. Thanks, credit, hat tip to the Monkey Bread plugin, probably the paid version, probably some sort of free demo. I'd imagine there's like a 30-day demo or something. I don't know. Maybe there isn't. But you don't need it to be. You could work with this just as well. But this is what I'm working with because I like color. What can I say? So I'm going to click this button. And what that did is it highlighted a object. This is obviously JSON. This is an object and an object inside it and an array inside that and an object inside that. So it's, nested hierarchy as we know. And I did that partly two reasons. One, I wanted to make sure that when I did the demo, I had the right selection. So let me click that. This is actually very, very simple. And I did this manually, no high tech. I just say, hey, start at 41 and go to 173. And that sets me up for clicking the button that's to the right of it, which I'm going to do in a second. So I'm going to click this button. By the way, keep your eyes over here, right there. I am going to calculations on the right. And and then I decided it would be clever to pop over to use the I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use the demo, right? That's a little bit of a peek ahead the corner. Actually, I'll save that for basically this could be better, by the way, fair warning. What I think is good here that maybe people haven't used before is we're doing the set selection, pretty good use of the set selection. And this could be better if you wanted to use like design functions, field def, so you're not doing JSON string. There's a lot more you could do with this, but I left it in there because the set selection stuff is good. And maybe this array stuff is good. Like I said, could be better. All right, let me do the array thing. So here I've highlighted product, and then that's what I am doing is I'm basically extracting the selection and then I'm, just parsing and manipulating it. You could probably, someone other than me. I use the XML more for code gen. It's not like I'm generating that much JSON. I do it, but not as often as I do other things. So it doesn't get as much attention. This code from 7 to 11, I think is pretty good. Field content, selection starts, selection size, little dot syntax, very readable. This selection line 10, that's what I'm doing. And then I'm off array. And then this is, like I say, you can look it over. It works, I can say that. Let's see, what does it mean it works? Let's click here. Let's click here. The one thing that I think is a little bit up in the air is if you were going to if you're going to try and build JSON array, what would you do? How would you write that array? Let me go find my script here. Fight in the windows. It's behind my zoom window. So if I move my zoom window, okay, horizontal zoom. There we go. Oh, that was a good idea. I made it much smaller. Okay, here's so we had text in a field, and we clicked a button, and then we have script steps. So that's we're picking up on the code generation thing. So we're kind of combining things, and so that's selection and so forth. By the way, this is in the demo file: red text, green text, blue text, bold with a toggle, and so forth. So that's my little text editor. It's a fragment of it, but this would be like if I'm trying to figure out like, let me look at this, and I just left that in there. Okay, so that's a little bit of JSON. And like I say, someone probably could be done better, but I figured I'd throw it in there for today's demo. And now I got a next up here. So we did XML, we did a little JSON. I am going to do a Mac OS X service. Now, there's a custom function I was looking at recently. I got a shout out to the person. I'll drop a link after I'm presenting. I got to go find it. Somebody wrote a custom function. It's on the Brandang website, and I thought it was pretty terrific. And like I said, I'll drop a link. I'm probably going to, add one line or something. There's actually one feature I want to add, but it's awesome. So demo. Now, before we do that, let's see. If you look at this custom function, which I renamed just because I like that for custom functions, and obviously I'm going to put a comment in as to whose idea it was. The format date time. So here's the syntax. It takes the custom function takes two parameters. It takes the date or time or timestamp, any of those three, that you want to format into a string for a letter, an email, on a layout display, any number of use cases, and then using keywords, I guess you could call them, that are wrapped with square brackets. It does a substitute. Actually, I'll show you the custom function in a minute. Hey, how about now? This is the custom function, hopefully. Okay, this is, and actually, maybe this up on the screen, it's custom function 629, if anybody wants to go look at it, 629, if anyone's in a hurry before it gets posted. And basically, it's a substitute, case sensitive. And that's a good thing, it's case sensitive, because the gentleman, I think it's whoever did it, the person, has some case sensitivity in there. And let me think, months, MM for months, capital, little m for minutes. Anyway, that's the custom function. And then my contribution to society today is to make it easier to deploy, because I would have a hard time remembering how to type this. And even if I remembered, I'd get sad that I'm typing all these keystrokes there. Obviously, a lot of ways to do it. But here's one way, like, people can use all those typinators and all those different things. But here's a Mac OS X service, get current date. And by the way, you see the before right there. Get current date, right click, service, wrap with date format. And so it's typed it all in, and I could evaluate that. And then if I wanted to, I only did 2 of these. I could see how July is JUL, but it could be JUL, and see how Friday is FRI. I think this is how you get to there. Is that right? Or maybe I'm going to break it. No, for Friday. Anyway, so that today's da. Okay, so that is, I'm going to cancel because I could demo it again. And then this file was created on, the other thing that we do with dates, pretty popular thing to do, is I have a timestamp, and I might want to have it export a file onto the hard drive and have it sort chronologically and readable. And so that created that. So that is a Mac OS X service. That's code generation. That fits the topic of the day. Okay, so we saw this website. Watching time, I got 19 minutes. Is that right? I should say I've got 9 minutes, leave conversation. Here's the code objects is COD, my personal favorite. You can download it, look it over. I like that a lot. Let me hide that. Let me just see. Oh, I know what I'm going to do next. Let's do. Okay, Mac OS services. It's on FM Soup. You can see a little walkthrough on how to set up a Mac OS X service. If you want, send me an email. It's got to be a separate email. If you want the 2 things I just showed you, I'll send them to you. Give me a couple days to, catch up with other things. But that's on FM Soup. Come back to that. Keyboard shortcuts, check that out. Just because, nothing to do with today's presentation, but very cool. Here's today's presentation. Let's see, what did we promise? Get functions, I got to cover that. We talked about design functions. FMP URLs, we certainly did a bunch of that. Did some things not here. I feel that I should, coming in for a finish line here. Oh, here's Automator. That's what you just saw. Just make sure you click that checkbox. Not that hard. Worth it, or already built, so you can send them around. Okay, I would encourage that. That's Automator. I'm going to show you that. Okay, what else we got? We did the script editor. That's on the website. Final thing to show you. One use case. This get functions. It's we talked about get functions. When we do our help ticket system, which is like a ridiculous number of hours to build a really super duper thing, it's we use a get function. People call it help. We use get function for the file name, the layout name, the record ID, the privilege set, the account name, probably more things than we ever needed, but pretty much every single thing. And then the get functions go into the help ticket, and then the FLR, click that. We saw that already. It's different because we know the record the person was in. We go to the file, we go to the layout, we go to the record and or records. And that brings the final thing. The thing I did for the Brighton group was the idea of passing a found set around, essentially replicating a snapshot link. And there's the code I put in there, rough code. Someone might want to make it better, but whatever, better than nothing. I'm using it, but I thought maybe one day I'll complete the suite, if you will, and make an FMP URL that encapsulates pretty much everything that a snapshot link can do, including the sort order, the found set up to a point, because FMP URLs can only be so long. What else? The current record, sure, why not? The sort order can be done. It's in the code I put out there. It's in the presentation. What else? You could do the status bar. You could be the mode, and that would be like, then you'd be done. You never have to do it again. I have not done that. This is me conceptualizing. If I were to do it, I'd have to think about it. Yeah. But that's as far as I got with that. This was from that presentation. And so I got 15 minutes to go. I'm going to stop it there because I think there's potentially, questions, anything on code gen at all. No questions are too crazy. And by the way, thank you all once again for letting me present. Thank you all for paying attention, hopefully, to a fast talk in New Yorker. I hope it didn't give you a headache. I'd like to say, good thing it's recorded. If it was me, I'd watch it again. But that's it for me. Questions on any topic, or I yield my time.
Hey, anybody have any questions for Tony? Let's see.
Oh, I do see, hold on, I said chat, 2 questions. Let me go look. Laramie Erickson says morning. I would agree. Although technically in the East Coast, it's the afternoon, so sorry. But I guess it's a good morning where Laramie is. Marty Cohen says, thank you. Really enjoyed it. That was Skip. And Marty said, thanks. Anyway, oh, you know what I will do? Oh, now here's my website. I'll do that. I'm going to type in my email. This actually is worth recording. 2 things. One, I'm having issues with email off and on. I've got 2 emails. The one that's most reliable is the Gmail. So if you do say, hey, if you send me an email with the subject line code gen, I'll send you the file. If you'd be so kind as to whitelist, hold on 1 second. The following, I'll say it out loud, TonyWhite7@gmail, and I'll drop that in the chat. And then I'm going to drop another email. This is the one that's sort of the official one. I have to pay attention, otherwise I'll get it wrong. TonyWhite_twdesigns.com, that should work. And then you may, I'm probably going to send it from TonyWhite7@gmail. So if you whitelist it, I did this before and someone said, hey, it hit my spam filter. I like to, someone says, hey, send me that. I like to kind of make sure they get it. Otherwise I feel like, oh my goodness. So the email will say like, just give me a got it, just so I know you got it, because who knows what happens. So those are a couple email addresses. And that's it. That's all I got.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Jonn needs a few minutes. He's off to take a short bathroom break. So
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. Okay. Are you ready to present, Jonn? Or do you need a few minutes?
Actually, I am. I can use the extra time in case there's some discussion.
Okay. All right. So John's got some kick-ass JSON custom functions he's going to show us. So
well, no pressure. I hope you're right.
If you're ready to go, Jonn,
okay,
take it away.
Before I share my screen, I'm just going to introduce what I'm doing a little bit here. So I've got, thanks, I've got like 40 minutes, so I have a little more time than I thought. I'm always guilty of discovering after I put something together, I have a lot more material to show than I thought I did. I work for a medical company out of Minnesota. And what we do is we download a lot of JSON information about patients and insurance companies using several different APIs. And then we load and store a lot of data in JSON, but these are really large JSON objects. They can run per patient, per event, anywhere from 10,000 characters to 1.1 million characters just for one patient, for one policy when we're doing analysis. So really large JSON. And what happens is that we have arrays within the JSON that vary in length and vary in format. So I may have in any given object within the JSON between 30 and 50 different array indices. The tricky part is that in each index in an array, the data we get is not consistently formatted. It's going to be different information in each index. So we have to have the ability to search throughout the entire JSON looking for specific matches of several elements within each array index to know what to parse for the patients. Very complicated stuff. So in order to do it, make it easy, we developed a series of custom functions, most of it to handle the JSON. And Matthew Dahlquist and I have done this together. Matthew's a developer as a consultant to our company. He also is in the Minneapolis area. I give him about 2/3 credit for the stuff we've built. I'll come up with an idea, he'll flesh it out, or he'll come up with one and we'll flesh it out together and build these custom functions between us. And it's been really brilliant as a team to build these different custom functions. I'm going to start with some simple native FileMaker JSON related functions, build on a theme, and move through building some custom functions on top of those that work a little better than some of the native ones. Everything I'm going to show you is native. I built the presentation in FileMaker itself, so I call it either file point or file note because it works well as a presentation tool as well. Companies heavily reliant on FileMaker with a lot of other integration points with other types of technology. So let me show you. Screen. So everybody sees my screen, my screen here?
Yep.
Yes?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so we're talking about Json today, right? Json Alexander. No, not quite. The idea is I divided this presentation in 4 quadrants. On the left is where I'm going to place some code, and then it would be like what you would see if you put it in the data viewer. And here's the results that we'll evaluate when I hit this button. On the right, it will often show how the code might be placed either into a script or within a single script step, because a lot of what we're doing, we can compile a number of functions within single script steps. On the bottom right in green, you're just going to see notes and comments, things for discussion. So mostly you're going to be looking at the upper left and the upper right to get a sense of what we're doing. So at the simplest level, everybody uses set variables. So that's how you would show it in a script step. Or you might do it in a let function, right? Where I'm going to create the location variable equals Los Angeles and then show it. And simply I'm going to display Los Angeles. Great. That's as simple as it gets. Building on the next theme, I found it easier because we want to declare variables inside script steps. So instead of using set variable, we've got a simple custom function called FMDiSC, where you just feed it the name of the variable, whether it's local or global, works for both, and then the value, and you put it in here. And here I'm showing how I would do it in a web viewer, but the same idea could be multiple of these could be shown in any given script step. So I'm simply pulling out LA, very simple, right? And here's the same thing, only I'm showing it with global variables. Or it was local, it's global, same idea. Next thing down, when you're doing set variables in a script, you might have multiple times when you're setting a script, but we are starting our whole approach with declaring multiple variables, sometimes many dozens of variables, all within one script step. So this is how I would do it for the web viewer, but I would actually want to use my new custom function. So here we go. I'm just declaring 3 local variables. I'm only showing 1. Great. Now I'm going to go and show you a slight different formatting using FVariableCreate, where I'm declaring the name of the variable. These are local variables I'm using and the values, and then just putting them in a stack. This is all real simple stuff. This is a slight different bit of formatting. It's a little bit different, same idea, showing, excuse me, back up to this. Here I'm actually going to the next thing. We use a native function called Json Set Element, right? Where here I'm declaring local variables, and then I'm going to create a JSON array like you all are familiar with doing. And this is how it would go in the script step, right? I'm simply creating some JSON by the use of 3 variables, packing them with their names and name or key and value here. But what happens here, you notice going between these 2 slides are the same, except that because I'm using a variable name called name and called date and called location, and I'm actually using that as the key, here's the hint that there's some redundancy. I'm having to type the word name each time I build the array, the JSON, whether it's an array or not, or an object. And that redundancy takes extra typing, it's busier. This is a hint that there's a simpler way to do it with JSON. But one thing I forgot to mention is, I'm assuming that most of you are very familiar with JSON, and that a lot of you probably already come up with some of these custom functions. So I want to get a sense in the end, if this is something that you've already done, or you've done a lot better job of, or if it's something totally new to you. I really want to get a sense, because I don't know what you guys are doing, what you're doing relative to what we're doing. We use the while function a lot, and so you'll be seeing that come up in a little while. So the hint here is I've got duplication of values shown in the blue, the purple, and the green. So what we've done is we've created a custom function called FJSON.setSimple, as opposed to Json Set Element. This is called Json Set Simple. And it's simple in the sense that all I have to do is have the variables created. Here's some local variables created, or how you might see it over here. And then I run this custom function, set simple, and all I have to do is reference those variables in a list. So I want to use the list function. And then I have to surround the variables with quotes. Absolutely imperative that they're in quotes. And then when I run that, I get the same result as I did before. Only this code is a lot easier to work with moving forward than the previous native code where you have to have all the brackets and you've got to have 3 pieces in each line and all of that. Here, if I decide that I'm going to add something new, and not that I have a variable, but if I did, all I would have to do is maybe I want to indent it because this is the type of formatting I like. And you may not agree with my formatting approach, but I like lots of negative space. And I can just put in another variable name, right? And it will load that into the JSON as well. So this becomes a lot more extensible and easy to use and adjust as you go by simply inserting variables into the JSON when you build it. Very simple and straightforward. Here's the same exact function call, only now I'm loading global variables. So I wanted to make that point clear that all the stuff we're doing, wherever possible, it works for local or global variables. This is a little different formatting than we've seen before. Let me step back. So here we're declaring variables up front. Then we're creating a list of those variables in a thing called var list, and then we're running a custom function. Another way of creating it, if the variables are already created, is just create the variable list, call the custom function, define it as, in this case, $JSON.for, and we will get the results. So there's different ways of formatting it. I have my preferences because I like a lot of negative space. When you use the native JSON get element function, right? So I have JSON4 that I created here. So it's in a global, you see the data viewer up to the right here. I've got the JSON held in a global variable. So when I come to the next step, I can say, just show me that, right? Pull it out of the variable. But if I come here and I want to just get the name here, I can pull out just the name. And in this case, here I'm pulling out all 3. So I'm pulling out a stack of using traditional JSON get element. Building on a theme. Here's set simple. Now I'm using JSON 5. Just a new variable, so I have other ones to reference. I've stacked it this way, using global values, using the JSON set simple function. And then I have another one that mirrors it. Let me go back one. This is the FJSON set simple, shown there, also shown in the header. Set simple. We have another function just like it where you change one later, and it's get simple. Now that I have JSON 5 declared, I can come here and say get JSON 5 using FJSON get simple instead of set simple, and that's going to extract whatever I want to, because it's going to pull out of the JSON and redefine these variables from scratch by pulling them out of the JSON with the get simple. So we have JSON get simple and set simple, and literally I can copy this section of code from one script where I might be creating a script parameter as set simple, and then when I go to the receiving script that's going to receive that parameter, I say JSON get simple, and it just reverses the order. So I'm passing in our large project, which by the way is close to an MVC approach, model view controller. We have data tables in one place. We have a controller where all the heavy scripting goes on in a separate file. And then we have an interface file. We've separated it all. We actually have hundreds of files on like 10 different servers. So we're breaking things apart and we're passing between files, all the functions. Everything is JSON. We've gotten away from XML, and everything we're exchanging between scripts, between files is all in XML. So I can simply copy this from the set simple to the get simple without having to change anything. And as I'm building the code and I'm learning new things, again, it's easy just to stack the variables if the variables are predefined into this function call. And it makes work so much faster as you're especially when you're doing discovery as you're building, which is impossible to get away from, even though you have requirements. Here's a very simple situation where I'm declaring the variables. Then I'm going to set the JSON 5 in this block here. I'm going to create the JSON. And then in the same thing, I'm going to kind of do a round robin. I'm going to pack the JSON, then I'm going to extract it all in one step. Right? And all I'm pulling out here is location. If I change my mind and I want to get date, all I have to do is change this. And now when I run it, I'm going to get today's date. So if this makes sense. Simple use of two very similar functions, set simple and get simple, and the add uses the while function. I'm not going to tear into it, but I'm going to give you this file. I'm going to do a little cleanup on it and then upload it this weekend so you can go through all these different scenarios. The process here is declare the variables, whether inline, meaning all done in one place, or in a script step above. Create the variable list, and we like to use either the list function or the term var list variable list. Then here I'm running set simple for the JSON and then get simple. Put it into JSON, pull it out. Here's an example of using global variables, setting a very simple get simple, extracting it from the JSON 5 that I've already created. And here I'm just simply showing with the JSON and its JSON 5. Very simple call because I'm going to build on that. Here's an interesting thing. When you use the native function JSON format elements and you have a block of JSON that you want to format, that works great so long as it is multiple elements in a JSON object. But if I were to say format elements for JSON here, or maybe some value and name in there with semicolon and quotes, it's going to break. You're going to get an error, and the native function gives you a question mark error, which is not real useful. So when you're actually testing out JSON, when you start with a large block and you keep reducing it down by pasting the different paths into the quotes here, when you get to the point where it's just an element, you no longer get a response. Now you got to use a different function and use JSON get element instead of format elements. And I want to be able to work with my JSON all the way through with the same format elements function, regardless if there's content in here or not. How I do that is another custom function we wrote called FJSON format elements. It's just like JSON format elements, but it's FJSON format elements. You'll notice if I back up here, you get an error using this with something that actually breaks down to an element. It's actually called JSON format elements, not JSON format element. So it doesn't work on a single element, it works on an object that has multiple elements. So our new custom function, FJSON format elements with empty quotes, will just show the JSON. But if I build something into it like show me name and run it, it's gonna run this function as if it was JSON get element. So basically it does an analysis within itself and says, if there's only one element, then just do a JSON, a native JSON get element. If there's multiple ones, like there is back in here, then give me a formatting of all of the elements. So I can use the same custom function regardless of what the end path is. That doesn't make perfect sense, just ask me. If you want to take the JSON that has been formatted real pretty, like this here, and you want to strip it out, right, and you want to unformat it or uglify it, then you just simply do a JSON get element with empty quotes, and then you get the native JSON the way it was, unformatted, which is much easier to store than something that's formatted. Again, if I get close to 1 million characters in JSON, and then I have a script step that says formatted, that's going to cause a little performance problem. So basically, we store everything unstored, and we have the option to review it by formatting it as we go. So I'm just uglifying it here, nothing more. Now I'm going to use FJSON format elements again, and I'm going to reformat it. And now I'm going to come to something and we get a little more interesting here. We've got JSON 6 that I'm going to try to manually build 2 arrays, right? They each have 4 indices, 0, 1, 2, and 3. First one's bakery, second one's produce, and that's what you get. That's nice. It's not formatted, but it's a nice simple array built manually in a script. If I look at it this way, it's a slight different way of formatting the same thing where I'm setting the elements up front and then I'm just responding in a let function. The reason I do it this way, show it this as opposed to the previous method, is a lot of work we're doing is all going to happen in let functions. So I like to work consistently and systematically. So my methodology is always the same. I also like lots of negative space. This is easier for me to not only read, but to implement more custom functions to near the bottom of the let function, where here I've got to have to like write two script steps, one to do this and one to do whatever I want to do to extract it. So on the next screen, what I want to show you is here, we're simply formatting the elements so I can display them up here and demonstrate that both bakery and produce have 4 indices in each array, right? 0, 1, 2, and 3. So that's a total of 4. I have another custom function where I need to know what we call array height. How many indices are there? I want to get 4, but if I try to run it off of that JSON I built, I'm going to get a blank response. Now, if somebody has a suggestion of a better error code to provide than a question mark, I want to hear it. But this function is not going to work because I'm calling the entire JSON, which was this. I'm not pointing it at a particular path. I need to get there. So what we'd have to do before I can use this function is come to another one called FJSON list array values. Again, all using the while function. What this one does simply says, I'm going to go into the JSON and I just want to show the bakery array, right? So I can see the bakery array being highlighted here in the C 0 through 3. That's a start. The next one does the same thing with produce. So I'm just pulling out the values, not the keys, just the values. But that's all I'm going to need to figure out what my array height is. Now I can take and use 2 custom functions, the FJSON list array values, which again produces just the array values. And then on top of that, once I have it, now that I know I have the array values, I can come in and get you the array height, on this case on produce. And it's 4, because there's 4 indices, 0 through 3. I could just as easily take bakery and change this. That should give me the same 4. Makes sense. I'm using 2 custom functions to determine what the array height is, because I'm going to have to go into some massive array structure that has 40 or 50 different indices, and each indices is going to have objects that are different, and there might be arrays within the objects. It gets complicated, so I need to tear it down because I might be looking for something specific. And here in this one, I'm returning the indices of this function called return indices of key value pair. If I have the JSON 6, I'm looking for the path in bakery, and then I have an N in this custom function. This is a new custom function. It's going to say, I want to know what all the indices are in this path here that's going to return me this value result of whoopie pie. And obviously that should be index number 2. There it is. So now I have a custom function that's specifically going to allow me to parse an array and determine where my values are in the array so that later I can take this index and find other things. Like I may want to come back into produce and say, well, at that same array level, banana is the produce value equivalent to whoopie pie and bakery. If that makes any sense. At least I know that I've got matching pairs that I can group together for comparison purposes. Here's another JSON object with arrays in it where we have pairs, bakery item 0 name and 0 ingredient, and then the index 1 name and ingredient, 2, 3, and then produce separately. When I run that, you'll see, and I can show this a little bit better. I've got bakery and item, and then I've got the ingredients, and at the bottom, this is interesting, the array for produce shows up horizontal for the 4 values. What I've determined, I think the number is 37. When the content of the array has characters that exceeds, I think it's roughly 37, FileMaker will automatically flip it to vertical delivery presentation as opposed to horizontal. But I wanted you to see that this one's horizontal. Of course, this one is busier and it's going to be more vertical. What I'm interested in here, we're focusing on the word frosting. So under the bakery section, under index 0 and index 2, I've got frosting as an ingredient. I don't under index 1 and 3. So when I go to this next one and say, I want to go to return the indices of the key value pair of bakery item ingredient frosting, it should only return the ones that have frosting. It should be 0 and 2. Indeed, that's what I get. So now I know where frosting is. If I now want to find something like what matches it here under name, I can do that. That'll be the next step. Now, this is presenting the same exact logic in a way that I find more reasonable to format. This I find hard for me to read. But since I know I have 3 parameters to pass in this custom function, JSON, path, value, I want to see them stacked. It's easier to work with and it's easier to extend. So it's the same exact thing. It's going to return indices 0 and 2 over frosting. The next one, now I'm going to take all of that, focus on frosting. And now I want to find out what product has frosting, which obviously here is donuts and cake, because they belong to the same indices, 0 and 2. But I'm using a while function to pull all that out, focusing on the name, which would get kind of busy to use in coding every time you use it in the script, but it works. This is pulling out donut and cake. I found with the while function the values for the name paths or keys based on finding the frosting, and I could switch that around to any other value here. So that's interesting. Here I'm going to show you the same thing, only the while functions in blue, indicating that this is a hint that this entire while function becomes a custom function in our next record. So I'm going to simplify the implementation of this by coming here and saying, oh, that's different. This looks a lot different than previous, but this allows me to use a new function called return values at indices. So here's what I do. I start with the path search. I'm going down the path of bakery item ingredient. So bakery item ingredient, right? What my goal is to find a result of bakery item name, which is the second element in each array index. Okay. So I define what I'm going to search against and what I want to get. And then I come and use the return indices of key value pair for frosting, which will get me 0 and 2. And then I call this function by passing the same JSON with this result that I've declared up here, which is just the path of bakery item name, that matches the indices that I pulled out for frosting. Back up once and again go over this. That this will produce donut and cake backing up again because I pulled out indices 0 and 2. So now when I run this function, it's going to give me donut and cake, just like the while function, but now I don't have to look at that while function. It's all hidden in a custom function. And this is much more manageable. I can do a lot with this. I can extend this and say, return a lot of different values, and then compare them. Are donut and cake both made with flour? Are they both made with eggs? Whatever I need to do. And I need to take these giant JSON objects and arrays for a patient's policy and compress them down to what am I looking for exactly for this person. It's a quick way of extracting the JSON and parsing it down to just the information I need, because I don't need everything that I receive. And then finally, I'm good with time here. Finally, you're going to simple one, a foobar one, because I know probably at least a few of you are thinking, well, can you take these get JSON, get simple and set simple functions and work to build arrays? I don't have to manually build arrays. And the answer is yes. The secret is it requires the use of repeating variables. So if I define my values here, foobar 0, 1, and 2 is apple, banana, orange. And again, I'm defining the variables there and instantiating the variables here. Then I'm putting them in a list. And then I'm using JSON set simple on the list for the repeating variables. And then I'm going to format it just to make it pretty. And here we get foobar, apple, orange, banana, all in an array. So this is the trick with using this JSON set simple, the JSON set simple custom function is when you want to create arrays, you need to be able to use repeating variables, and they're local, so they're going to disappear as soon as you use them. So look, You don't need to even really know JSON to use this. These custom functions, I'm using JSON, I'm using my different custom functions to instantiate or set JSON, or to parse it or get the JSON objects, elements, arrays out. And I don't even really need to know JSON, because where is there any JSON like this? It's just instantiation of variables. So the process for this, simply declare the variables, in this case, repeating variables, put them in what we call vars list. It's a nice clean way of having a parameter set a list of variables into. Then call that simple custom function set simple. And if you want to, my FJSON format elements, which can handle any kind of format. So that's pretty straightforward. The basic rules that you need to keep in mind are, when you're using JSON, set simple and get simple. With set simple, you might be using existing or new JSON, but the variables are going to be a list in quotes. When I use get simple, probably some new JSON, could be existing JSON that you're appending. Again, variable list in quotes. So the variables have to be in a list. They have to be in double quotes. The times that I've forgotten that, it's broken. And then it's, as we know, JSON is very sensitive. You got to make sure you don't have spaces like I show there, or a pilcrow, or any other bad characters. It has to be clean. It's so easy, especially if you're on Windows. You copy paste. A lot of times it's out of a Word document, so you're going to get the space following, and you need to remove that. And then, of course, if you're going to create arrays, you need to use repeating variables. And that is the entire thing. I'm really hoping there's some discussion or questions.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Jonn?
Okay. Let me ask you guys this. Are there people that have already written custom functions that do this kind of stuff? Like behind the curve, are you already doing this? So you're like, oh, it's a no-brainer? Or is it something new? Or could they be elaborated on? Any thoughts that I'm stimulating about how to do it even better?
We seem to have an untalkative group this morning. You may have to, if you want to say something, unmute yourself manually. My spacebar doesn't seem to be working. Can you show what the custom function looks like?
I can, and most of these, thank you, it's a good question. Most of these have been well documented. A few of the newer ones, we haven't implemented documentation. The array height one's a little bit simple. There's no annotation there. But the JSON format elements, yes, I put some annotation. This is pretty simple. This is just basically looking, try to do a get element, try to do a format element, compare and find out if one's failing, so you know which one to use to run them. So this is very simple. We use a lot of good annotations. The top of this is all header. The guts of the whole thing and bottom are generally fairly short. That's a simple one. That's just for formatting. F variable create. This is pretty simple too. This is really just an evaluate function where you're going to take the text and make sure you remove certain characters and just evaluate it to use the evaluate function to declare the variable. The fun ones are Json Set Simple. A lot of annotation. I mean, there's a look at all this, a lot of annotation. It comes down to be something very simple. It's a while function. Again, I like a lot of negative space, and we tend to put all our line by line some discussion of what's going on in that line off to the right, as clean as we can get it. So you pull in this in JSON, you get your list in quotes, you have a counter, and you increment in the while function through, and do some substitutes and evaluate some get values. I'll give you these so you guys can pour through and look at these. But that's pretty simple. That's a fairly bare bones while function that pulls that off. The get simple is kind of the opposite of that, but it's still a while function. It's kind of doing the opposite, and it's going to be parsing things into variables. We have a list bar type of evaluating. The evaluation actually creates the variable. while function there. I have a simple one is valid. It's about as simple to get. That's just looking for a question mark. Oh, so return values at indices, return indices of key value pair, and the list array values. So this also is a custom function. It's a little more complex. This is just to get the values out of the array. So basically pouring through the particular path in the array that we're looking for and gets them all in a while function. The return indices of key value pair is the next thing that happens. We need to add a little more annotation to that. But basically, under the while function, that's just taking the JSON, the path, running through a counter, and determining what indices have the value that we're looking for. We're passing in the JSON, the path, and the value. So we're basically searching through it and grabbing the index if it has the value the path provided. And then finally, there's return values at indices. Still need to get some annotation in here. But this takes the indices that you fed in the previous function along the same path in the JSON, loops through the counter, and finds the values if they're in that path and gives them to you in the vertical stack. So, without stepping through every while function. If you're familiar with the while function, these are pretty straightforward implementations. Some are a little more complicated than others, but cleanly put together so that anyone can follow it. I always have this philosophy. I try to make things as clean as well documented as possible. In case I die tomorrow, somebody can pick up my work without stressing out. So it's important to us to keep things well documented. Any other questions on actual custom functions?
John Rosen has something in the comments. It says, I tuned in a little late, but what I usually need most of all is a function that shows me how to refer to each element in a JSON tree. I'm guessing that some of what you've done will cover some of that.
John Rosen, can you speak?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So just, in comes, maybe I get some JSON from some data source someplace, and it's got a complicated structure. And I need to, like, I'm looking for, I see a particular part in there, and, it could be somewhere sort of down in it. And I know I need these like three things. An easy way to figure out how to refer to those particular, let's say, keys or array values in FileMaker, but given this, large JSON clump of code that comes in.
You're saying so you get some code, but you don't know what the path is to the information you're looking for at all?
Well, I mean, yeah, I do know the path, but let's say it's involved, and I want to easily find the path to some particular piece in there.
Right. So we're doing that with this. It's a hard thing to describe just verbally, but conceptually, if we know a general path, but we don't know in which array or where in the JSON it might be, we're actually searching for a path and then grabbing indices for that. And then we look for, because we're looking for things, not just that particular element, but we're looking for elements all around it in various arrays. There's sometimes I'll have JSON in one particular array and they have 50 indices, and I might need to look at 3 of those indices that has values because I need to match them to known expected values, right? Like, is this person on Medicare or not? So I'll be looking for the term Medicare, something like that. And then I need to group that with other things that I need to comparisons. So with these custom functions in the right combination, I'm able to narrow down the path I'm looking for to a subset of indices within an array, and then to determine which one or ones match multiple elements perfectly. This is something that, it took us months to learn this, right? Practice it. So to explain it verbally or visually with this kind of a hands-on thing. I'm certainly going to give you this file so you can play with it, but it's been really good for us to know what the general path is, and then you develop the specificity, knowing the indices, and then doing comparisons on elements. It's can be a little iterative. I pour through countless notepad documents of JSON to compare people looking for common things. I'm looking for common paths. I found out this morning that if you're on Medicare, but you're also on Medicaid, then the actual name in the path switches, because if you've got co-insurance, then something like identity name becomes process name. And I actually have to have conditionally say, well, if you find one element that has this value with the name value pair, that means when you're looking for Medicare, I now have to look to a different name on the path to find the actual Medicare. So it involves grabbing multiple values and doing comparisons to finally narrow it down to what path specifically you need to look for. And all of these tools I've shown you together as a package allow us to do that, but I still have to do a lot of manual analysis. I'll extract certain portions of JSON, like just the indices for this one array, and then I'll narrow that down to which ones have terms and actually do it manually to find what patterns are. And then I use my custom functions to actually code and then test a lot of records. It's so crazy. The American Medical Association, or whatever, the whole medical industry, for those of you who work in medical, right, because I've been doing that for like 22 years, it's so complicated. I jokingly say the whole point of the American medical industry is to prevent people from collecting benefits. They make it so complicated that it's near impossible, and that's what our company is really good at. We probably put more energy into actually refining how to get something paid for than anybody else. It's a wonderful thing. We have a whole team of 9 FileMaker developers who do nothing but try to figure out how to get things paid for. But it means a lot of iteration, study, and customizing the code, looking for the paths that change. Every single insurance provider, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of insurance providers in this country, actually provide us JSON in a different format. And I have to be able to reach across the industry, across all different providers, and extract their JSON just a little bit differently. Very challenging. I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but it's kind of indicating there's some iteration, but there's also a matter of like search and compare and narrow down your paths. Does that help at all, John?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, John, there are some tools, you can find them on the Mac App Store, where you can just paste in a big JSON object and it'll show you the path sort of in like outline format. So it'll tell you the exact path to any specific element. I haven't used it in a while, but I've got one called, hang on a second, what is this thing called? Just Json Editor. You might give that a try.
I'll take a look.
I certainly use a lot of online tools for test when I'm building JSON to make sure that it's valid, right? There's a lot of good valid tools out there. But Json Editor, it's called?
Yeah, just Json Editor. It's very simple. But it helps if you paste in a big chunk of JSON, and then you can just kind of see it in outline format and go, oh, that's the direct path to that particular object.
I also tried another technique that I'm not going to show you guys because it's so complicated, where I literally wrote scripting in FileMaker to go through an entire JSON object and flatten it out and take each key path, even within each indices, and make records, where actually it's really fast. We might have hundreds or thousands of records for one JSON object, but I actually take every value, every key, every name value pair, every element, every object, and every array, and rip them out into records. And then all I have to do is reference the records by name, and I don't actually even have to parse the JSON. That took a couple of weeks just to come up with the idea to literally tear JSON apart and flatten it into records. And I use that to extract certain things, because all I have to do is search for the word and the path. And it's easier to like conceptualize when you've got a million characters. I can look at FileMaker records a lot easier than I can look at JSON, but that has certain limitations. If that makes sense, turning JSON flat records, and it's not trivial, but once you do it, it's pretty cool.
All right, well, thanks, John. That was a nice presentation. It'll be a great little tool to have in our arsenal. It is now time in the meeting here. I'm going to stop recording and give everybody the option to go into breakout rooms. So let me get here. Pause. Okay, welcome back from the breakout rooms. Before we go on with Mark's presentation, does anybody have any quick announcements? Todd, you have an announcement? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I do. Auto enter is happening. I don't know if, not sure if everybody's heard of this or not, but this is a virtual conference that is in actually 2 weeks from Tuesday. And we have Claris as a sponsor. The three main sponsors are Proofgeist, Reliant, and Claris. And then we have about 9 or 10 vendors also sponsoring and they'll have booths, and we have about, I think there's 36 sessions planned over 2 days. Claris is also participating with some content, some under the hood type sessions and some panel type discussions. So if you haven't registered for that, can I share my screen real quick?
Sure.
Is the entire interface going to be through Discord?
No, we have a whole, here's the website here. It's a whole virtual platform. It's a virtual conference platform called Hopin. You may have heard of them, but there's there's stages, there's expo booths, there's all kinds of networking opportunities for chatting and exchanging contact info, probably some silly games and polls and things like that. But yeah, so here's some of the other sponsors, and then here's all the great speakers we have that have already put together sessions.
Todd, could
So-
you put the link into the chat, please?
Yes, I'll put the link into the chat.
And then how does it work for the booths? Because WIT FM wants to set up a booth,
Yes.
so to speak.
Yes, so there's the booth. You get basically like a breakout room. You can think of it that way, but you get a few extra things. You can actually do live stuff. You can do pre-recorded stuff. You can have up to 20 people in a conversation. More people can be there watching, but you can put 20 on the screen and talk. So it works like that.
Okay, this
So-
is done. Did somebody from WIT FM already sign
Yeah,
up?
I'm pretty sure they're already in here. No, but I'm pretty sure there is a WIT FM booth.
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, pretty sure there's a WIT FM booth. Let me make sure I put the link in the chat. And Alan's company is going to be a sponsor as well, so they're there. So yeah, I mean, we just felt like we didn't want to go another year without doing something. And so that's what we did. There's still spots open if you're any vendors, if you want to do that. It's $500 for a booth. It's pretty cheap. We have, I think about 800 people registered so far. And I think we'll get some more before the time is up. And there'll be dedicated time for people to go into the expo and look around and meet with vendors and things like that. So there's the link in the notes there in the chat. And if you want to be a vendor, there should be a link on that page as well to sign up to be a vendor. Speakers are a little too late for that, but we do have breakout rooms. So if you want to just go there and start a topic, you'll be able to do that as well. So we hope hope people come and have a good time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Todd. Mark, are you ready to go?
I am indeed.
Okay, our next presenter is Marc Larochelle from Productive Computing. He's going to tell us everything he knows about Claris Studio.
Yeah, so thanks for having, oh, good, thanks. Thanks
Floor
for
is
having,
yours, Mark. Sorry.
thanks for having me, guys. And great to be back here at FMDiSC. I think I presented several years ago on various topics. Productive computing has been around for as long as a lot of you guys, actually, since the early 90s or mid 90s, I guess. And we do all kinds of things, plugins, products, hosting, recently training, got a Productive Computing University, and provide both free and paid courses for FileMaker related topics, both advanced and beginner. And also we are involved with vertical markets as well as part of our company. We don't talk about it too much in the industry, but we have two vertical markets, actually. One that has been underway for several years for the towboat industry, And then we have another vertical, which we're going to be launching here in September for the veterinarian industry, for mobile vets who care for pets that are needing hospice and end of care. So where the vet would come to the home. So we're building a FileMaker system that orchestrates all of that. So we're pretty excited. So let me tell you about Claris Studio, and then I'll show you what we've got going on here. Let me just share my screen and I'll throw up a few slides, and then most of this will be demo. If you do have questions, feel free to jump in, but I will leave plenty of time at the end for questions. All right, I'll share my desktop here. Okay, you should see a blue screen, and then I'm going to bring up the slideshow. Okay, hopefully you see my slides. If you don't, just speak up. Otherwise, I'll assume everything is good. So today we want to talk about what is Claris Studio and how does it fit in. So I want to talk a little bit about maybe your strategy as a developer of what this product is and how it might fit into your business and the industry as a whole. Then we'll do a quick demo. We'll create some forms and we'll connect those forms up to Claris Pro. Then we'll have a little bit more elaborate demo where we're going to take some mailing list information and connect that to an existing CRM, also built in FileMaker, or now soon to be called Claris Studio. And then finally, we'll do a look at doing a survey where we'll create a quick survey form, or I have one in place already. We'll share the link with you guys, and then you can be participants in the survey. And then we'll look at that charted and graphed in FileMaker or Claris Studio. So that's kind of today's agenda. All right, now, first of all, before I go too much further, there's a lot of people on this call that have direct access to Claris Studio today. In fact, a lot of this might be a review for you. Claris asked those who are platinum level partners to participate in working with this new product and also doing our best to, I wouldn't say advertise or promote, but rather train and teach and explain what this product is to other developers in the community. So what we're doing here today is what Claris was hoping we would do. And a lot of you guys have actually already done this with various user groups and things like that. So that's kind of what brings us here. I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and then this dovetails into what we have here today. So again, it might be a review for some of you, but perhaps we'll learn some things and some ideas for strategy. So what is Claris Studio exactly? So it's a lot of things, but I think of it as, and it's a lot of things right now, and it's going to be more things in the future, but I think of it as a web form builder. That's one of the big components of it. And I'll explain a little bit more about why that's impactful. It's also cloud data storage. So it's both of those things working together. And when we think about cloud data storage, it's the kind of storage that is almost limitless in terms of its expandability, its ability to be elastic, its ability to be international in terms of where it's stored and how it works. It's built with a web-first idea. So it's totally different than the traditional FileMaker storage that we are accustomed to. And that has a lot of long-term benefits for us as an industry. And also it maintains relevancy to the world at large, because this is the way the world is moving, and most of it, not all of it, but most of it. So what we have today and what you see here in a minute might not look like a lot, but I think the seed is planted in the right place. And I think the ladder is against the correct wall. So that's the exciting part of this. Let me keep going here. Direct connect to Claris Pro, Go, and Server. So this data that I spoke of, today we're used to working with third-party data. And a great example of this is, let's say, Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server or MySQL. We already have third-party data storage, and we can already connect to it using a technology called ESS. But here it's a little different because it's prepared and curated by Claris themselves. They own both ends of the equation. They own the data storage and in your ability to connect to it using a Claris ID. So whereas today, when we incorporate ESS into our connections, we have to use, not only we have to set up drivers, but we also have to be sensitive and aware of the ramifications of, we don't own that data. some other IT department does in most cases. So we have to work with IT, we have to work with other organizations, other groups. There's a lot of formality, a lot of pomp and circumstance, even to get a basic connection to those data repositories. So the exciting part of this is we have it directly and it's immediate and it's magical in many ways. It's sort of the promise of what ESS, what I always hoped ESS could eventually be. This sort of brings that paradigm into action. The other big thing that is stated, but I don't think is realized, is the anonymous data collection. So today, when we have to put up a website and we're collecting anonymous data, what do I mean by anonymous data? I mean, we're preparing something that's available to fill out on the web where we don't want to ask that person for credentials ahead of time. That's what I mean by anonymous data. An example of this would be add me to the mailing list. So here's a brand new person coming to your website. They want to be added to a mail list. We're not asking them to log in first in order to push data to us. They just push the data to us. So the website is front facing and it's anonymous. So we can do this today with a custom website, but that requires a web server, custom HTML, PHP, all kinds of, heavy duty languages that are non-user based. With the Claris Studio and the way that it's been designed it's point and click, push and plug and play, and WYSIWYG. Big difference. Now you can have a power user, an IT person who may not be a developer, but is responsible to creating forms. And that is going to be something with literally the click of a button. Now, there's some caveats to all of this, of course, but that's what we're embarking on here. In addition to the Claris Studio, that it's a cloud data and it has direct connections to Pro and Go, they're also going to envelope and incorporate something that already exists today called Claris Connect. And Claris Connect is your two-way communicator in a way. With Claris Connect, you can, based on a trigger, you can define a trigger to say, okay, when this happens, do this. So you have a trigger and an action. And a lot of that infrastructure is already built out. In my opinion, it needs to go further than it does today because there's enough limitations in Claris Connect where there's still some caveats there too that needs to be considered, but it does have the foundation of trigger and action. And the big key there is that you can use Claris Connect as a webhook where you can receive information based on a condition rather than going and seeking out information in the form of a request. In other words, you can just sit back and relax and something will come to you because it's being triggered automatically based on data conditions or some new form being added. And that, again, can't be understated how important that is in our new paradigm here as we move forward in the future with this platform. The biggest thing, though, that excites me the most is the idea that it's a freemium model, which I never thought would happen. To be honest with you, I wanted this to be, I remember in a kitchen probably 15 years ago where I boldly stood up and I said, why don't we make FileMaker Pro free? And that way we can introduce the idea of the FileMaker Pro in all its glory to developers without the burden of the financial burden that goes along with that. Because in working with new developers, and which I get the opportunity to do in universities here and there around town, the big thing is, okay, well, this is great. How do I get started? Well, you can go to the website, download a demo, and then all of a sudden, wow, it's a very short leash, a very short window to demo it before you have to pay some serious money, a lot more than developers expect to pay for a platform they're experimenting with. So my hope with this freemium model, and I'm sure a lot of you guys share this same hope, is that we'll introduce what we have known and loved here for 20 plus years, this great platform that we've built so many things with and provided so many solutions. We're going to introduce the up and coming developers to that platform with no burden, no charge, at least for one user. And they'll get to experience the magic that we did and that we do and experience today. So I'm hoping that it really takes off. I mean, it may take a year or two before it really starts moving, but this is what AWS does in terms of their model, free for a year, essentially. So you really get your feet wet, and I'm pretty excited about that, I have to be honest with you. So back to that story about the kitchen. So I boldly stood up and said, I wish FileMaker was free, and then we can find a way to monetize it later. And I was immediately squashed by a Claris employee to say, be careful what you ask for. And in other words, back then, that was very frowned upon as far as an idea that works. Obviously, it takes several years for the industry and the world at large to change, but here we are with the freemium. The other thing I want to make quick mention of is that what you see here today is very, very, very basic. And I'm hoping and in a sense praying that they really expand on what they have here, because again, I think their ladder's against the right wall, but there's a long way to go here before we have something that's, infinitely useful. And their promise is that, yes, it's coming, and it's moldable. It is not set in stone right now. And I think Claris, and I believe them when they say this, I think they're honestly waiting for feedback from the industry and from people to a certain extent to determine what is the best next step for them. So again, that's where I see all of this. Now, how does it fit into today's current model? So I already mentioned there'll be Claris Studio and Claris Connect. That'll be offered as a single solution called Claris Studio. And that's coming out in September. That's what has been stated. And then we'll have a product called Claris Pro. That will be a quote unquote new product. It's not really a new product. It's basically FileMaker with a couple of differences. And I'll show you those differences here in a minute. Claris Pro, Claris Go, Claris Cloud, or Claris Server. And I'm not sure what the name is going to be. And any question that we go direct to Claris with to ask them these questions, they're really shy about giving the answers. A, either because they're not ready to, or B, because maybe they haven't finalized those decisions. So that is the new platform model. Notice how everything begins with the word Claris. I think this does in fact simplify things, because as a freemium model, if I can just go to one place, add my ID, my Claris ID, and I have access to Pro, I get Go on the App Store. I can even get Pro on the App Store if I'm on a Mac, and maybe there's an equivalent for Windows. And then as far as the Claris Server in cloud, it seems to me that that might be still a separate licensing model, but the data storage, which I mentioned earlier, will be included with Claris Studio. So an up-and-coming developer for free will have access to all of this, including the built-in data store and the Claris Connect connectivity. And they'll be in a position to really provide a compelling solution or a demo or a prototype with no time limit and no payment required. Now, today we have FileMaker Pro, we have FileMaker Go, and we have FileMaker Server. And where there's been confusion, I think, is that some people think, well, all of that's going away because the name is changing and all of that. And I'm here to say that it probably will change down the road. But again, if I ask Claris these questions directly, they're pretty shy about answering them for whatever reasons they have to not answer it. But I do know, and in the survey, in the webinars I've watched, and I'm sure you guys have too, they have boldly come out and said, nothing is changing with FileMaker Pro. The name is going to be the same, and the licensing is going to be the same. At least that's the impression. Now, the name, I'm still not 100% sure how that's going to play out, but FileMaker Pro, Go, and Server are still here. And I guess that's probably the only practical way to do this, because they have thousands of users and customers using this model. And a lot of people are not necessarily going to be ready to go to the Claris Studio model for a number of reasons. Number one, it's completely cloud-based. And the other reason is that it requires Claris ID to get started. Now, for the up-and-coming developers, that's going to be great. For the people that have a different way to authenticate, there may be some considerations to think about. So what you're looking at here on the screen, I think, is a transitionary paradigm that we're in. We're keeping the existing customers and the way things work today in place, while at the same time adding on all of these other products on top of that to kind of merge in with that. Will this be the way it is in the future, meaning a year or two from now? It's hard to say. My guess would be that having the choice, they'd probably want it to be all Claris Pro, Claris Go, Cloud, and Server with Studio. 4 products. At the end of the day, that's probably what they're shooting for. But maybe they don't know yet. Certainly, I don't. But that's the best I can do as far as explaining this. Okay, so if there's no questions on how it all fits in, I'll just jump right into the demo. But there's a lot of bigwigs on this call here. So if you guys want to jump in and give your own 2 cents about where you think it fits in, you can either do that now, or we can, if there's time later, we'll do that.
Well,
Right.
I
Yes.
just have a quick question, and we don't know anything about the pricing model.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if you had any insight.
Let me just stop sharing so you can see me full screen here. Yes, we don't know anything about the pricing model, and we have asked that as well directly. And they're particularly shy about that. And perhaps, like, I'll go back to saying either they don't want to share it or they don't know what it is. And I hopefully not going to get in trouble for saying that, but I mean, I think that's the God's honest truth. No, we don't know what the pricing is going to be. And this is always the, we can get all excited about everything. And then if it becomes a pricing model that we feel doesn't fit the marketplace, then we're going to be really asking ourselves, how does this fit in? Is it as good as a fit as we thought it was? But that's the way it is with all products. And sometimes manufacturers of these products, meaning the software companies, in this case, Claris, sometimes they don't know until they test it and either realize it worked or it didn't. So it feels, though, that this era and this particular leadership is in a place that is a little bit more open to change than prior, for the last 5 years prior to that. But I really don't know. I'm speculating and just giving you my own opinion on that. But that's a good observation. Pricing is going to be a factor in this.
Yeah,
Any other?
I just want to
Dave,
step in there, Mark, and say that, there's no secret. I think that Claris in their heart of hearts would love to have nothing but cloud. Everything is as it is in many of the other new platforms. I think they know that we've got a lot of on-prem and traditional client server customers that like things the way they are. The art is going to be in how they move, towards this. And price, you have the stick and the carrot. You go, the carrot is, we're going to have new features, new benefits, new things waiting in that new stack. The stick might be, it's going to be more costly, or we're going to deprecate features in the old stack that are going to be enticing in the new stack and so forth. So I think those are things that they might play with. I also, it being July right now, and we're really talking about 2 months, ish before the drop date for this new platform. I think given yourself, other platinums, many of the professional developers here who've been on these webinars and had these conversations, I think it's going to be pretty important for that message to get really cleaned up and straightened out in terms of here's what it is, here's what it isn't, here are the features, here's where we're going with it. Because if we don't clearly understand the path, how are our customers? Our customers are going to look to us for a very simple, do this, not that. This is perfect for that, but not this. We need to be able to target where these different platforms that come out of Claris fit and what's going to require attention or modification. So I hope they start to summarize things down and get a distilled version pretty quickly, because we're going to need time to share that with our customers.
Yeah, completely agree. It's going to be essential into selling it. You got to market it properly in order to sell it properly. So thank you, David, for that observation. And I've heard that in other developers that I've talked to along the way, that same phenomena of, boy, it's hard to understand exactly what it is that we're looking at and how it fits in. I think also Claris is relying on us developers more now than ever. I mean, it wasn't a soft ask. It was, we're giving you access to this. We'd like you to present it to the community. And I think that's not a bad idea, because in many ways we can interpret things and curate that a little bit better than perhaps they can at times, because we're in the trenches, we're in the fields, we're using this, we talk to the customers, we build the cars and we race the cars. So we should be the ones talking about it. So I like that aspect of it. All right, so if there's no other questions about that, I'll just jump right into the demo and we'll go over some basics here. Now let me share my screen and we'll get that going now. Okay, we're back to a blue screen here. And what I'd like to do is just say that the Claris Studio starts with a website. Got my little springboard here, shortcut springboard, and you want to log into Claris Studio. It's good. I'm kind of glad my session expired so you can see what it's like logging in. It's not unlike logging into FileMaker Cloud today. It's kind of the same thing. And their goal is to use the same Claris ID that you might use for Cloud today with Studio. So to be one universal Claris ID. Today, it's two separate IDs for the purposes of development. They haven't merged the two yet. Okay, so let me just log in here. Okay, so when you first log in, you'll be presented with a team screen. And these are the people that are on your team. So if you had a company that was using Claris Studio, you'd have each member who needs access to it be enrolled or added to this list. And then you are defined very much like a privilege set. You could either be a manager or a user. There may be other levels along the way. And that determines what that person can do within the Claris Studio environment. So today we see all kinds of people in here because these are the people that are currently testing it or part of the platinum groups that are using it and official. We've all been made team managers, so we have unconditional access. Now with this, the way they've rolled this out is that I can see everyone else's data. So none of it is privatized right now. Everything we're doing here. In fact, you can see David and Bob right here or on this call are actually listed here as team managers as well. I'm explaining that so that when you look at some of the things I'm showing you, we're seeing everyone's bucket of data that Claris Studio has. All right, so that's the team, pretty straightforward. Then we have the forms itself. We'll be spending our time there. I'll go to that last. Then we have downloads, which is just a convenient way to download. Today, we are looking at Claris Pro as the downloads. We have a Mac and Windows version. In the future, we might have other things to download, but this is just an easy way to get access to the client application. Again, I'm thinking about those newbie developers who are using the platform for the first time. They don't want to go through a lot of deployment challenges. So they can just go here, click it, download it. Installing FileMaker these days should be as easy as installing Zoom, which is a local app. And if we get to that point, then we've got something that people can get their heads around. And then the fourth thing over here is something called Claris Customer Console, which is really nothing more than gets you into the other area of the Claris ID and management screens and systems. You can see here it's prompting me because it's a different ID. In the future, you'll just go right in with the same ID and you'll be able to see your management console. Today, that's used primarily for FileMaker Cloud. In the future, it'll be Cloud and Server and Studio all combined in that. So that's it, just those four things. But where you're going to be spending most of your time with Claris Studio, and of course, this might grow over the years, is in this forms area. Essentially, you want to create a form, which is a workflow. It's a series of web-based data entry screens is the best way I can explain it. And just like I mentioned earlier, I'm in a team with all my brothers and sisters here where they've created their own forms. Some of them have labeled them, some of them haven't. I've created some forms here for productive computing, but instead of using an existing form, which I'll do here in a second, I'm going to create a brand new form instead, so you can see what it's like from the get-go. Again, keep in mind that power user, that non-developer, that new developer that just graduated computer science school. So you go here and you add a workflow. The workflow presents this template. This first template, it's not named, it's just the default structure here, comes with a registration form where you put the data in and a confirmation form where you receive some sort of a confirmation acknowledgement that the data has been put in. Now, in the future, what you might see when you create a new form is a list of predefined templates, not unlike when you create a new FileMaker file, we see a bunch of templates we can go to. So I'm anxious and excited about that. And I would also imagine that we would have power and access to those templates where we can create our own templates specific to us, or maybe there'll be global templates that everyone who uses Studio has access to, and they come from Claris directly. All of that is undefined, undetermined, and we don't know what's going to happen. But they have mentioned that templates is on their list of things to build. So starting with the registration page, I can click here and edit that page, and it brings me into an editable web form. I am in a browser here, so there's really nothing special about it in terms of needing to load anything. I'm in Safari on a Mac. It works fine with Chrome and all the others. And you can see it's predefined with a first name, a last name, an email, and some comments. Each one of these has its own type and personality based on the type of element it is. But they give you the basics here so that you can kind of be inspired to say, okay, this is pretty straightforward. This is actually what I need or don't need. I have text labels / text fields here or labels, and I can move things around. And you can see as I move things around, things reposition. Now, this is both a good thing and a bad thing. For the most part, when it comes to web forms and people who are challenged, design challenged, which I know a lot of developers are, me included, having these things move around is good. But there is a lack of fidelity here in terms of what I actually can do down to the pixel level. It's not like FileMaker where I can go to the layout mode and move things pixel by pixel. It's not like that. So that's what I mean by both a good thing and a bad thing. Good, that a power user is going to get up and running in no time. Bad, because if you're a developer who wants to tweak this to the nth degree, you're not going to get that. But here's my things. Now, I'll just show you quickly right here where I can add objects. And there's various objects. I have short text and long text, numbers, drop downs, checkboxes, multiple choice, date, time, timestamp, phone, email, and address. An address is an entire address block, by the way. Let me put that on there. It brings in the address 1, 2, suite, city, state, and zip as a collective. And that just saves you time from having to wire that individually. So that's that object. And then I have a text block, which is up here represented by this little label, an image, and other things. So those are the basics. And when I add those objects, they sort of behave like what you'd think about as a FileMaker object. They're not exactly the same, but they're pretty close in terms of how you think of what a checkbox is or what a dropdown is. And we'll look at examples here in a second. So that's how you create the basic form. So let me just remove this object here. You saw me move these things around. Now from here, I can either go to the next page up above, or I can go back here to the forms window. Let's see here. Yeah, back to the workflow, and I can go to the confirmation page, clicking it that way. Notice there's no fields on the confirmation page. It's just the confirmation page. This is where you'd have a submit button. Excuse me, this is after the submit button where you'd have the confirmation. Again, I can change all this. I have access to change really basic things in the headers of these. I can change the opacity. I can actually change the background color and images, and I'll show you one that we doctored up here in just a second. So there are some basics, but I'm not going to lie to you guys. It is very raw and rudimentary at the moment. I think the spirit of this product is not so much about building a gloriously beautiful website, but rather a means to an end to quickly build something that can collect meaningful data in an anonymous way. I think that's the spirit of this product. And they're quick to talk about what it is and what it isn't in terms of, it does this really well, but it's not necessarily good for that. So just keep in mind when you're looking at all this. So if I go back to that workflow, I can add an additional page here very easily just by clicking this plus button, and it inserts a page between the two. So now I have my first page of registration where I can enter preliminary data like we saw here. And let me go back to that just to not confuse you here for a second. Then I have my second page where I can add more and more fields. And because it's a second page in between the two, I have now a previous button, and then the submit button is here on the second page versus the first page, which has now a next button. So it's smart like that, where if you add multiple pages and you need to collect a lot of data, it's going to easily handle that. No problem at all. So I can add page after page after page, and I can insert them wherever I want in whatever workflow I want to create. So that is a basic form. So let me just go back here and not get too far ahead of myself. I'm going to delete these pages and just leave it to the simple page, and we'll add some data, and I'll show you how we can connect that to a product called Claris Pro, which is going to be tough for a lot of you guys to get used to because the name is not FileMaker Pro. All right, so here's my basic. I'm just going to do first name, last name, email, and comments. Perfect. And then the page after that will be the simple confirmation page. Now up here, I can preview what that might look like, and I can preview it under some different conditions. I can look at it, what it might look like on a mobile device. In fact, let me return here and just go to page 1. This has a little bit more meat to it. All right, so let's look at this on the preview. So there's what it looks like on a laptop. Here's what it might look like on a tablet. And here's what it might look like on a mobile device. What I like about this is that it's responsive. It's going to handle mobile devices, and that's exactly what you expect from a web-based form. Again, more things to consider when you're building custom websites. Is it responsive? Is it acceptable on all these other platforms? And these are the things that are hard for FileMaker developers, especially if you don't have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP chops, which a lot of us don't. So this gives us an opportunity to present stuff to customers quickly and easily, provided we can fit this into their model. Okay, so that's the preview. Now the share button. Now it's time to bring this form to fruition. And just like you'd expect, I have a simple one-time link, and I can copy that link. Currently, it's copied to my clipboard. And that now is my public web page. I didn't have to push publish. It's just ready to go. So I'm going to bring up a new browser window here, but one that isn't logged into Claris Studio, just to prove that it is a private browser with a brand new, fresh instance. I'm going to put that link in here, hit enter, and we are going to be putting in some data here. So I'll just put in my name here. This is what a user would then fill out on the web. And a test comment. Okay, so that is that. I submit the form, I get my confirmation, I close my browser, and I'm good to go. Now back here under Claris Studio, what we might see as a developer is that we can peek here at the data using this option. And now I can see the data has come in from the web. And this is that data repository or that bucket of data that comes complete with Claris Studio. And I can name my bucket. I'll just call it, let me call it PCI 6, because I have a feeling I have a PCI 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. So it doesn't allow multiple duplicated names. So I've got one basic record in here, and I can see that. Now, this is sort of like table view in FileMaker, but it's not table view in FileMaker. What you're looking at here is data stored in the cloud. Technically, it's MongoDB, I believe. And MongoDB is an advanced, built for the web data structure. I wouldn't even call it a database. I'd call it a data structure, where its sole purpose is to handle massive amounts of data and retrieve it quickly, as the best way I can say it. And I don't want to get too technical on that, but this is special here in terms of that. It doesn't look like much now, and it doesn't do much here on this screen, but what it can do in the long run for us and the amounts of data that it can store is going to be mind-blowing. All right, so I've got that here. So now let's go into FileMaker or Claris Studio. So you might ask yourself, what is Claris Studio and how does it differ from FileMaker Pro? I'm going to say that it's 99.9% the same as FileMaker. It's birthed from the same code. FileMaker simply was cloned in a sense and became Claris Studio. Claris Studio, or Claris Pro, I should say, is, let me just show you the preferences here under About. And if you look closely, I don't know if you can see that on the screen here, it's version 20, whereas FileMaker Pro is version 19. So another question I get a lot is, will we ever see FileMaker 20? And I don't think it'll ever be publicly stated as FileMaker 20. I think it'll just be Claris, FileMaker Pro, or Claris, or FileMaker Pro. But I think they're abandoning and ditching all the version numbers. That's my personal opinion, but I've seen evidence of it, because if you go to the help today, it's just simply called Claris Help. And in the old days, it used to be Claris 18 Help, Claris 17, or FileMaker 17 and 18 Help. Anyway, so that's one difference, is the version number. The other difference here for Claris Pro is that you can go here under File, and you get this new option here that says Switch Claris Studio ID, which is another way of saying log into my Claris Studio account and identify myself so I can work with the data. So that's here, traditional login. I'll just log in the same way I did earlier with my credentials, and I'll sign in. Now, this Claris Pro knows it's directly connected to the cloud or to Claris Studio. And because of that, I can go here and work with it. So I'll create a brand new file just to show you how basic this is. Create a brand new file here in Claris Pro, not unlike I do today. A blank file, I'll call it tests, and I'll put it over here on my desktop. There we go, test. All right, and there it is. And the difference here that you'll see is when I go into define database and I create a new table or a new table occurrence, I get a new option here, which I never had before, called Claris Studio Data Source. And notice I didn't have to configure anything. It's just ready to go. And what I'm looking at here in Claris Pro is every one of those data repositories that I mentioned earlier, including the brand new one I created called PCI 6. So I'll click PCI 6, and now voila, I have a table occurrence. And for those of you who've worked with ESS, this is going to be very familiar. It's almost identical in the way that it works. But you'll notice it's in italics, which means that I have full access to that data or near full access to that data, but it's in italics, telling me that it's not really in my file. It's not here on my desktop. It's in the cloud in this case. So there it is. Now, let's go look at this in layout mode. And I will just go ahead and do something bold here, and I'll do it right here, I'll just change my layout to look at this table occurrence PCI 6. And then of course I have no fields on the layout, but if I go here to fields, let's see. Yeah, I guess these are my fields. I'll put them on the layout. And there's the data that I just entered from the web form. And it's showing up here in FileMaker magically. Now, for those of you, again, I'm going to say this over and over again, for those of you who already use ESS and are familiar with that technology, this is almost identical to how it works. But for those of you who haven't, this is really exciting stuff because now I can collect data on the web and have it immediately available to me. So in my other demos here, let me show you where you can take this and go to the next level. So let me, by the way, if there's any questions, now would be a good time to interject before I go on to the other two demos. And I think I have till about 12:45, so I think we're making great time here.
Mark, I have a question.
Yes.
You've talked in the Claris Studio as an input method. Does it have a presentation layer at all? Do you know?
Well, in terms of presentation layer, like, does it predefine the data?
Well, no, a user enters data, but can a user view data through Claris Studio?
Right now, no, because it's not built yet. But
Okay.
the idea is that you would be able to present your data to a user in much the same way we do today. To what extent they take that is a good question. And sort of we have that today with WebDirect. WebDirect is a great example of a presentation layer on the web. And they were clear to say that this is not a replacement for WebDirect. In fact, they're continuing to build out and invest in WebDirect. This is more of, at least in its early stages, is more about data collection and what it takes to do that on the web. In particular, anonymous data collection, which is hard to do today.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Good question. All right, so let me go to another form that I'm working with, and I'll quickly go through this one because I do want to save some time here. And I think this one is called, yeah, here it is, Productive Computing CRM. We'll put that in. Now, I created a simple thing, again, collecting first name, last name, email, and comments. And this form has no data in it. But I wanted to show you what it might be like to use an existing solution, because a lot of us don't have brand new files that we can start with. In fact, that almost never happens, right? We always have some huge system we're working with. So I'll show you that. Let's just pretend for a minute that I was working in a CRM that had a bunch of data and a bunch of schema and all kinds of things. In this particular CRM, I've got this one little connection here to my Claris Studio data. And you'll see again, it's in italics, indicating that it doesn't really exist here. It's in the cloud. And I made a simple connection where I've taken the email address and matched it to the email address in Claris Studio, which in this case is a unique identifier. So it acts as a unique identifier. And that will allow me to match existing data to an existing system. So it took me no time at all to make that connection, just grab the bucket, make a quick relationship to it. And now that data will show up here under this portal called mailing list, so that if I go to a particular developer, the information will show up here. So all I need to do now is quickly add that data, and I'll do it the same way. This will be a good review. I'll create a brand new browser, paste my web link, and start entering my data. I'll do the exact same data entry I did last time. And test comment. Whoop. Right, and we've got that done, and we'll submit that. That's done. So now again, the data is in Claris Studio right here. And you'll notice that it doesn't immediately show up in Claris Pro. Now there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I'm not sure if that's ultimately going to be the end behavior where we'll have to create some sort of a cache refresh. There's a script step that I can run to do that. Or if it will be further refined and iterated so that it does immediately show up, much like we'd expect if we added this data to any other table in FileMaker. And of course, we all know that portals don't necessarily refresh right away, depending on the situation. So again, all of that varies. But even if I go to another tab and I come back, it's still not refreshed. So again, this could be because it's in beta and that they haven't really got that working yet. But let me just show you how you can refresh it. I created a simple refresh script here. I think it's called refresh. Yeah. And check this out. It's so easy. I'm refreshing the portal, but I may not even have to do that. I can just do refresh window with this option that is seldom used, but it's always been there, flush cached external data. Because the data is external and I'm flushing it, it's going to flush the cache. When I call this command, it will immediately update my portal and it's there for the taking. Now, if I closed the file and opened it, the data would still be there. It would be refreshed and works. The other advantage here that we have, and again, this is a huge, is now this acts and behaves very similar to FileMaker data that I created locally. I can do a search. I can do a search for anything in my comment, even through a portal, even through a relationship. So this is something I can work with directly, and I haven't had to learn anything new. I just make my relationship like I always have. I can make my finds like I always have, my conditional formatting like I always have, and that data is available to me, but it's not here. This also solves the age-old problem of, oh, our FileMaker database is so huge. I've got over 1 million records. It's bogging down my system. My backups take forever. This might answer some of those situations where maybe we can store all of that heavy duty transactional data somewhere else and just reference it here in FileMaker. Again, the promise of ESS and what ESS does today without the hindrance and handcuffs of installing drivers and working with third-party IT, which is in most cases.
I have a question about the validation on the form.
Sure.
Is there any way to validate? Do you have any kind of triggers, or are there any macros, any kind of scripting?
Great question. And no, right now there's none, but it has been talked about. It was one of the first questions that Robert Halsey got presented with. How can I validate this data? Or how can I even calculate the data? Or how can I make a decision based on the data that's entered? For instance, if I pick that I want to select car versus train, if I select car, can my questions then be geared towards my car answer? And then continue the form that way, a smart form like we're used to today when we build smart forms. So that doesn't exist. The validation doesn't exist. None of that exists. In fact, it doesn't even store IDs or date created at the moment, which is why I said early on, right now, what you're seeing here may not seem very usable in the long run, but the promise of what it can do, if we can see these results and have these, if Claris can pull through on this promise and build all that stuff, we'll have something pretty special. All right.
There's nothing stopping a user in Claris Studio from entering a second registration or whatever with the same exact email.
Correct. Yes. And the same way that we have those problems today when we build custom websites, how do we prevent against duplicate entry? All of that code and all that logic is stuff we build in either using JavaScript or other mechanisms today. And we have to do that. Of course, it takes mountains of time to do that. So there's not really any way right now to do all of those things. And believe me, what you just mentioned here is really just the tip of the iceberg of what we technically need or want with a proper web form. No matter how simple it is, you're still going to want the basics. So yeah, these are very good things to bring up. Mm-hmm.
One quick question is, at the moment, the way that Claris Studio is configured, what you say it's great for anonymous web data collection, but what kind of use cases specifically do you see where that would be useful?
Oh, well, a couple come to mind. When a customer says, boy, I'd love to have an interest list created. Dear developer, can you create me a web page that has an interest list? And I want that data to go directly in our system. In fact, I'll show you that right here. Let's just say they asked for that. I have a layout here that kind of explains that. Somehow I got into drawing mode, stand by. Okay. Yeah, I've got a layout here for that to show you. Where all that data coming in could be presented and directly in the system, and it could either be connected or not connected to the existing data. So back to the other question that we had about how does it validate whether the name is already there or the form is being entered twice. We could have a page of a listing of all the data coming in, and then we could make a simple relationship with a simple connected or not connected button or a identifier here in my list view, showing me whether that person on the interest list is already entered or not, and then I can take action on that. So one example, Bob, to answer your question is an interest list would be one use case. And in fact, a lot of times we get asked for that. Can you create an interest list? And now we have to go through some form builder. Then we have to make API calls to the form builder to bring in the data. And then if we want it to be automatic, we got to create a kind of a web a webhook, or we have to query the data every day or every hour or whatever. It's just a lot of monkey business to get that done. And all for a simple request, which is, can you build me a page to collect data? So that would be one example. Another example would be a survey. A lot of times customers ask us to build a survey for them, or they'll use something like, SurveyMonkey or something like that. And that's all great. And those tools are tremendous. But then the data is over in SurveyMonkey or whatever. It's not where it needs to be, which is in FileMaker. So I have to either import it or do all that stuff. And so that's another use case of where you might see anonymous data collected. Now, if we can get to the point where it's smarter, or we can build a link to a web page that presents data, conditionally, like, for example, scan this QR code, and the QR code will look up data on that customer, that specific customer, based on the QR code itself. And then it presents to them on the web all their information. See, that's something, again, we really can't do. Well, we can do it a little bit with WebDirect, but again, there's a lot to consider. There's security and the way that works, but this might be an interesting third use case for it. But I'm sure there's others that I haven't thought of, but those are the two that come to mind right away without putting too much thought into it. I'll be running out of time here soon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to one last demo, if I may, and have you guys participate in it just so you can get firsthand knowledge of this. I've got a form already created called survey. And on this survey, I've got some basic questions. And the questions are first name, last name, company, email. I'm going to have you guys fill this out. Feel free to use fake data or real data. It's totally up to you. And then page 2 asks a little bit about what level of Claris developer you are, how many years you've been working with Claris and FileMaker, and what other areas you work with. This is a great example of where we create radio buttons, a drop-down list, and checkboxes on the form itself. That does exist today. So I'm going to share this link now, and hopefully it will work for you. We've seen that this link may ask you for your Claris ID under certain conditions. Not exactly sure why that is, but if that happens to you, I'm going to give you a shorter URL to use, and that will solve the problem there. All right, so let me just load this up in the chat. I'm going to send this to everybody right now. There's the link. Go ahead and click on that link and fill out the data if you would, and we'll watch the data come in real time with the people on this webinar or this presentation. Anyone who can't get the link, I'm going to now present to you a shorter link that will and should work.
This one did ask for a sign in.
Yes. Okay. If you're getting that sign in, that's kind of what I expected. Let me see about getting you a shorter link. I have it right here on another clipboard. Here it comes. Okay. Take a look at that second link I just posted. That should get you in without any fuss. I don't know if it has to do with the length of the URL or how the URL is interpreted, but it's the same URL. It's just one is shorter and one is longer. So
yeah, that worked a lot better.
Good, good. So that's what a user might see. And go ahead and feel free to fill that in. And I will toggle this as we work here together. And look at this. Already we've got tons of data coming in. We've got 16 records. This is all from you guys. And while that's happening, I'm going to load up another FileMaker file that I pre-made here ahead of time called survey. It's using Claris Pro. Here it is. It's a blank screen at the moment. And let me just toggle back here and see where we're at. So we're already at 23. So I'll just start with those 23 records. And I've got 3 charts on here, and I'm just got a refresh button. So the refresh button does just what you saw the other day or earlier. It does the refresh script step with the cache data. And here I'm just drawing a plain Jane FileMaker chart, no different than we always do today. And then I've got the Claris usage now, and this is real data from you guys right now, right here and now. So I'm already populating it. Wow, this is pretty balanced as far as how you guys work with this. This third chart down here is actually using a third-party tool. I've used an API for a chart so that I could get a donut chart, which FileMaker doesn't provide donut charts. So I wanted a donut chart, so I went out and got it. That's just 3 great examples of how that data can be immediately used in Claris Pro also known as FileMaker Pro, for meaningful stuff from data that I collected from you guys just now. And as I refresh these, the numbers will update as the data comes in and becomes more complete. And if I just look under the hood, just again, to show you how simple this has, I mean, I'm just using a plain Jane chart. I mean, this is nothing crazy or advanced. The fields on here, and look at my data graph here. I've got 2 table occurrences. I've got the PCI survey table occurrence. And then I've got this other table, which is just housekeeping stuff, just to keep an indicator whether the chart is drawn or not. And that's it. I mean, it's got 7 fields and I've already got all this kind of juicy stuff to look at. And then this bottom chart, you can see I am using a web viewer for this. I'm using an API. Quickchart.io is the thing I'm using for that. And then I'm defining that again in a single script step. And here's my draw chart. This one script here with 24 lines of code. And Jonn Howell, I apologize for not commenting it even more, but there are a few comments in there for you. This whole thing is all I need for those 3 buttons, this 24 lines of code to do that. So again, I'm not just saying I'm just talking FileMaker here, but it is exciting to be able to take that data that we just collected now and get it in a chart that quickly from all you guys, which are calling in from all over the place. This just wasn't really available before Claris Studio, not in this same way. And for that concludes my presentation with 2 minutes left over.
Hey, thanks, Mark. That was a great presentation. That makes it much more clear what we're up against here, or what we're looking forward to in the future. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away.
Actually, I'm a little bit concerned. I love to use WebDirect. Do you have any other word on how that might tie into the studio by any chance?
You're talking about WebDirect in particular, how it ties into Claris Studio? Well, WebDirect is an extension of, it's another tool to present data. We have Claris Pro, we have Claris Go, we have WebDirect. So WebDirect will be connected to a FileMaker file at some point. That's the nature of WebDirect. That file will be undoubtedly hosted on FileMaker Server or FileMaker Cloud. That data, based on its version, will have direct access in the same way that, because it's a FileMaker file, you'll have direct access into Claris Studio data. So if I go through the development of making those table of current connections, if I make a connection to the file, I will have no problem presenting, as far as I know, I'll have no problem presenting that in WebDirect. As far as the credentialing and how that works, most likely I'll need some form of a Claris ID or some external authentication. That is unclear, but as far as the physics of it, it should work.
Very good, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions or observations?
Mark, I have this is John, an observation / I guess judgment, so please forgive me. It seems that this Claris Studio web form product combines some of the technology you might see in other tools like Smartsheet, SurveyMonkey, and WordPress, and maybe many others. But the real advantage is it kind of wraps a lot of those different functionalities in one place, and then it's accessible by the other FileMaker, the other Claris product lines. That seems to be the real advantage. Because you could do a lot of this in Smartsheet, I know, but integrating it into FileMaker is going to be a lot easier. So that seems to be the big advantage for us. It's not conceptually new technology. It's used a lot of different places, but it's wrapped within a product line that we're doing. That makes sense?
Right. I couldn't agree with you more. And when I say it's never before seen, I think I meant never before seen by a FileMaker developer or accessible by a FileMaker developer in that way. Yes. Yeah, good. I mean, that's a great way of saying it and describing it.
Quick question. The data that's created, is that by default on AWS and with a MongoDB backend?
Yes. Yes and yes. Although you don't have direct access to the data by way of an AWS console, that's reserved for the people at Claris. But that's where it resides. That's what exists. That's what's pumping it out.
You can't see the raw JSON from the back end, though, can you?
No, none of that is exposed, probably on purpose.
That's interesting. automatically translated into FileMaker fields, standard fields behind the scenes.
Correct. And something that's identifiable to us and connectable using the relationship graph, which again is what ESS does. So I think they just took all that technology they had and put it so that it can work with a MongoDB and something more modernized and web ready.
Mark, to John's point, do you think it's possible in the future they'll give us access to that backend coding so you actually can see the XML or JSON?
It's hard to say. We asked for something similar with Claris Connect in a way, and I don't think that has come to fruition. So it's hard to say where they draw that line between the tool they're trying to build and the audience they're trying to attract, merged with the lifelong developers and the advanced tools that we need at times to build something really compelling. And that is a hard line to straddle on a number of planes, not just for what we need as developers, but there's product considerations, product placement considerations, marketing considerations. There's just so much to consider. I don't know the answer to that. I would hope that they would, but as the moment I say that, I would probably, in my other hand, say, I regret that they did that because I've got so many users now into trouble, or asking me to unweave something they've created because they had access to it. But that's kind of a, again, training. And, we have access to a lot of advanced stuff today, and people either use it or don't use it based on their skill level.
Which, I would think that enterprise organizations that were using MongoDB would love to be able to take the back end that they had and put a FileMaker front end on it, but I don't see a way of doing that at this point because you don't know what the back end is from here. So you can't create any structure or anything to go with it.
That's correct. If you did do something like that, it would probably work a little differently than it does today.
Right.
And I would say that that's such an edge case today, and it might not be an edge case in the future, especially as more and more sophisticated companies who already have a MongoDB might adopt the Claris platform for all its benefits. To me, this goes back to the same paradigm of those companies that are sophisticated, that have Oracle databases, Microsoft SQL, and all that, and they want a way to connect to FileMaker. Claris presented a way to do that, and it's called ESS. The only caveat is that it's got drivers and conditions and mandates and stipulations, and it also is not full-featured. There's limitations with ESS. We all know that, but it does have its place, and its promise is awesome. If this can take that and run with it even further, that would be great, giving that benefit to the common user, the beginning developer, the up-and-coming people, the power users. A lot of power there. And quite frankly, guys, this is the way the world is going. When you talk about Airtable, you don't need to be a developer to work with Airtable, but Airtable is eating our lunch in a way, and that's geared for the power user. Or it doesn't require developers. So I think this product kind of speaks a little bit to that user, but then that user has so much further they can go once they open up Claris Pro. That at that point, the world is their oyster, and then take that to the next level where you talk about WebDirect or custom web pages or data API integrations that are customized. There is no limit at that point. So you start them low and get them all the way to where they need to go.
Yeah, I think this, if you really kind of reset your vision on, for all of those Google apps, people using Smartsheet, things like Airtable, et cetera, those collection points and the ease of use and so forth is where they kind of want to go with this. I think that's probably a good focus point on this. And then as things get more refined, they're going to obviously beef up some of the features and have session management so you can log back in and edit data, not just collect data. Another interesting thing that I was talking with Chris Moyer the other day, and he said, I believe Monkey Bread Software, with its 5,000 features, I think it's got the capability of talking directly with Mongo. And he's already starting to kind of play around with doing things with Mongo just to kind of familiarize himself with the page structures and some of the behaviors of that platform. Lord knows if we're going to get eventually some backend access for building web applications or other stuff to the Mongo backend behind Studio. But Chris has got a really interesting point about tinkering back there just to kind of see how things work.
Yeah, I mean, it's a powerful landscape, and the fact that we can tap into it directly is an equally powerful idea. And when you can tell a customer, well, your data is, when you can tell a customer your data is being housed in MongoDB, all of a sudden it's not so obscure. And which is another, thing that we've been struggling with in many ways when we talk to customers or strict IT departments who have their way about the world and the way the world according to IT. This really helps that argument and continues to validate the platform as being something totally useful and appropriate, even for the enterprise level customers.
It's going to be a lot simpler to deploy this new product on different platforms, technologies, devices than it is to try to do something like that in WebDirect. Try to take a WebDirect page and build it for an iPhone, it's a monster. And we've got all these different screen sizes. So it looks like it's doing a lot of things like the Smart Sheet and WordPress are doing is integrating the design into the form.
Right. That is, I don't know who's on the non-mute there, but if you want to mute everybody and then I can unmute myself, that'll be one way to
I
handle
just
it.
muted him.
Okay, great. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. You said a mouthful. Doing this in WebDirect, not only do you have to, build the schema, the fields directly, you have to put the fields on the layout, you have to organize them and, design them. Then you have to consider, how do I want the security to work, and page 1 to page 2, page 3. So if you need a 4-page web form data entry form, you're going to be able to do that in, an hour or two, let's say in Claris Studio, versus several hours in WebDirect. And it will, like you said, it will be ready to go for the mobile platform and all that. I mean, I think Jonn Howell, if he's still on the call, I think he did a whole presentation on WebDirect, and it was quite elaborate and very good about the pitfalls and the trials and tribulations of WebDirect and how it fits in. But WebDirect has its place. Absolutely. I mean, we use it.
Mark, after that session, I tried to build my own company website in WebDirect. And then I tried to come up with different forms for different device dimensions. And there's so many dozens of different possible formats. It became a ludicrous adventure. I spent like a month on that as an adventure and decided that is no way to build a website for a company.
Right. Yeah. It's really meant for, authorized users to get access to specific data or to fill out something or to be presented with something almost in an intranet more than a public network, for all the reasons mentioned. I mean, it doesn't handle the back button very well and everything else. So yeah, it's got its place, but so this is yet another tool in the toolkit. Hopefully we'll see it really evolve and go all the way. I'd love to see it go all the way. And most importantly, I'd love to see it adopted by up and coming developers, because I think that's really the game changer and the thing that I care most about when it comes to the platform. Any other comments? We had some good feedback here, guys.
Well, I just want to get clear that Claris Studio is not dependent on Claris Cloud Server. The Claris Cloud
Correct.
is a completely different thing than Claris Studio. You don't necessarily have to use the Cloud Server in order to use Cloud Studio.
That's correct.
Studio, right?
They're independent products, and their storage and mechanism and physics are completely different. Right. When you get a Claris Studio account, when you log in for the very first time, first name, last name, email address, you're presented with the ability to create a form. When you create the form, you immediately get an associated bucket of data with that form. It's a one-to-one kind of a thing right now. In the future, they said it might be.
Will be using the same backend database, different sections.
No. Was your question? Will everyone in the world be using the same backend? I believe. I don't know the answer to that as far as how it's physically set up on their end. Obviously, when you log in with your Claris ID, you're only going to see your data. But it probably. I don't know how it scales, Alan. I don't know how it scales, but I do know that they were mentioning that it's going to start I think on the West Coast or the East Coast from one data center on AWS. And then as they progress, they'll evolve to other data centers. So I'm getting the impression that the Claris Studio will actually have a location, a single location where it resides from based on your account. But there are tools in MongoDB that allow it to proliferate or to expand, to multiple regions if they so choose to turn that on. But again, that's probably so far in the future. They're probably just trying to get it built out. I mean, as an example, today it's read only. If I tried to enter the data, even in Claris Pro, if I enter the data, it doesn't accept my edits. It's read only, but it's only because it's not complete. But when it is complete, you'll be able to write the data back in Claris Pro. I'll be able to type and add records and delete records and all that. Right now, it's just kind of a one-trick pony. Comes in and that's it. It's read only. But
you mentioned Claris Connect at the beginning. Does that mean that it can make API calls from the forms?
Yeah, Claris Connect should have rights and privileges to the Claris Studio data, the MongoDB, as well as what it does today, which is FileMaker server data or any of the third-party apps that it already talks to. So I couldn't imagine them releasing Claris Connect without it being able to directly talk to the forms that are coming in. So to answer that question about validation and some of the other tricks that we want from this form builder, perhaps Claris Connect is the answer to some of that, where a new form comes in, maybe I want to receive an email. So Claris Connect can do that. New form comes into Studio, I get an email, or I get a new chat message, or it adds an invoice into QuickBooks, or any number of things that it might do, including running a script in FileMaker based on the form that came in.
I see. So it could be essentially a webhook to FileMaker's API.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I have seen none of it at this point because it hasn't been exposed to us as testers, but the promise of that is it's a natural.
Hey, Mark, is there going to be any problem embedding this studio form into a website hosted on an arbitrary server?
Great question. One that was asked on every single seminar. At this time, it does not support iframe technology or any kind of third-party embedding. So it doesn't support that. They took special note of that request because I think it's a big one. And by the way, this is something that is available in these third-party web tools where you can embed them where you need to, right in your website or elsewhere. So I think it's on their short list of things that we want or need as developers. But I can't make any promises. That's essentially what they said. Yeah, we've made a note of that. It's high on the list.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Great questions, guys. So hopefully in September, we'll see something. And hopefully we'll be impressed. I mean, at this point, it's a hope. But they've made some pretty big promises, and I think their heart's in the right place. Again, the ladder is on the right wall. So hopefully we'll see something big come out of this and bring some additional relevancy to the platform while maintaining the customers we already have. But I think the real power here, guys, is collecting that data and then using Pro to do what we normally do with it. Gives us another avenue for a customer, one that they didn't have as easily before without calling in the web team to build something custom.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Anybody else want to chime in here?
Sure.
Okay.
I got a question that's just sort of a hypothetical. It seems like now that there's a translation being done between FileMaker to Mongo, that ultimately this might open up some possibilities for, say, a mobile app that is able to, one, essentially stand alone, work offline, but also be able to connect directly to Mongo, right? In terms of, kind of gaining more abilities in the way the app looks and presents, but also just making that connection tight. Does that, anybody see that?
real question I have with that, if no one has another comment, is that how does the credentialing work? So if you're looking at specific data and privatized data, you'll have to credential it somehow. So right now, the credential system is Claris ID. So you have to log into Claris ID to get access to your data. That's not inclusive of the web form you saw that we enter data. No one had to enter credentials, obviously. But if you did have a mobile app and you wanted to use this new bucket as your data repository, then at some point or another, you'll have to match credentials with that. But assuming that you can match credentials with that, then it could definitely be a repository for data, and maybe it would talk to it in a quicker way than traditional FileMaker files. Yeah, I don't know. That's a great thing to ponder.
I imagine that we'll be waiting for a little while, even if that is going to happen. But
I would imagine you're right. I would imagine you're right. I think a lot is unknown at this point.
I wonder if the real takeaway here is FileMaker's easy access to Mongo. Forget kind of, okay, we got the studio to enter into Mongo, but it's, if this is, this is a huge storage system that we can now access and be a front end for. Even if right now we can only access the FileMaker aspect, but if we can do that, we should be able to get into other Mongo databases, data also down the road.
It's tough to say their position on that. I get the impression that they chose Mongo because it's a good platform to build on. I never got the impression that this was a conduit for other Mongo uses. I never got that impression. I get that impression. In fact, they would kind of hesitate on what they were using. I mean, they did state it, but it wasn't, they didn't lead the conversation with, we've got now a connection to Mongo. That was not their focus. Their focus was, we have something that'll help you guys out. So I don't know if they're actually going to go that direction. If they did, though, it would be intriguing, but there's a lot of database data solutions on AWS. Mongo is just one of dozens, really, of options and opportunities. So if you invest in saying, okay, we're going to do this with Mongo, well, that's great for the Mongo people. What about the people that are using, Aurora as an example? So what about them? Do they get left out? So I don't think they would go in that direction, to be honest, but you never know. You never know, because they're accommodating Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, and MySQL today with ESS. They're readily accommodating that. So maybe this is a conduit for more data repositories, those that are not necessarily SQL-based, but object-based data storage. So interesting, another interesting question.
Okay, any last questions before we wrap it up here? I'm going to turn off recording here.